Chapter 460. That terrifying, wild laughter was extremely dull. It was like rolling thunder exploding in the sky, covering hundreds of miles and clearly entering everyone's mind. It contained a powerful soul-sucking power, causing countless people to feel dizzy and tumble to the ground. Some of the weaker True Energy Realm martial artists were shaken by the demonic sound and fell to the ground, bleeding from their 7 orifices and screaming in pain. Ji Tianqing saw the collapse of the Scarlet Firmament Peak with his own eyes. When he saw the huge black cloud vortex, he realized that something was wrong. When he heard the demonic sound, his expression changed drastically, and his eyes became extremely anxious and serious. It's over. It's that unparalleled demon. The Scarlet Firmament Peak has been destroyed. The unparalleled demon is going to break the seal. Ji Tianqing knew very well how terrifying the four-winged demon that was sealed 1,000 years ago was. It was truly ferocious and had slaughtered the common people. He also knew that once the unparalleled demon broke the seal, the end of the sky-bearing sect would come. Not only the sky-bearing sect, but even the star ancient realm and the entire heavenly stellar region would be turned upside down by the unparalleled demon. When he thought of this, Ji Tianqing's eyes filled with anger and killing intent. He was so angry that his body ignited with blood-red flames, and he glared at Gao Yi in the sky. Gao Yi temporarily forgot to attack and kill, and his face was filled with astonishment and confusion. He saw the Scarlet Firmament Peak collapse with his own eyes and the demonic clouds surging in the sky. When he heard the mind-piercing demonic voice that resounded throughout the world, he was stunned on the spot. What's going on? Why would a demon expert appear in the sky-bearing sect? Obviously, Gao Yi didn't know that there was an unparalleled demon suppressed under the 9-dragon spirit vein. Ji Tianqing was extremely angry. His body surged with killing intent, and his white robe and long hair fluttered in the wind. Gao Yi. You're worse than a pig or a dog. The Demon Emperor has reappeared in the world, and the heavenly stellar region is about to be plunged into misery and suffering. You're the sinner who deserves to die. I'm going to tear you to pieces. After roaring, he once again raised his left arm that was as red as magma and fiercely blasted out a huge flaming palm that covered the sky. Burning Sky Palm. The power of this giant flaming palm had reached an unprecedented limit, enough to turn a 10,000 feet tall mountain into ruins. The giant flaming palm locked onto Gao Yi's aura, and its speed was also extremely fast, making it impossible for him to dodge. Boom! A muffled explosion was heard. Gao Yi was already an arrow at the end of its flight, and his fighting strength was very weak. He saw the giant flaming palm coming at him, but he couldn't dodge in time and was instantly struck by the burning sky palm. He was blasted to pieces on the spot, turning into countless pieces of flesh and blood that scattered in the sky. The leader of the Tianjian sect, Gao Yi, finally died at the hands of Ji Tianqing. Even the pieces of flesh and blood from his corpse were burned into black ash by the monstrous flames and scattered over the ruins. In the air above the Jade Sword Peak, Grand Elder Xiang Wuji had just killed the Thousand Autumns sect master. The Thousand Autumns sect master was dead, but his mood and expression weren't relaxed at all. He turned to look at the ruins of the Crimson Firmament Peak and saw the surging demonic clouds in the sky. He was instantly filled with grief and indignation, and his entire body surged with killing intent. Damn bastards! Everyone from the 4 great sects deserves to die. The Demon Emperor has been sealed for 1,000 years, and in the end, he's still going to break the seal. The heavenly stellar region will soon be filled with blood and suffering. Unparalleled anger and helplessness caused his entire body to tremble, and his eyes were bloodshot. The people of the True Martial sect and the Wind and Fire sect were also filled with shock, not understanding what was going on. Only the elders of the Sky Pillar sect understood that the end of the Sky Pillar sect had arrived. No, this was the end of the ancient star realm, and even the entire heavenly stellar region. After the demon emperor broke the seal, he would definitely slaughter all living beings in the ancient star realm and begin a massacre in the heavenly stellar region. However, the people of the Tianjian sect and the three great sects were still in the dark. They had no idea that an unparalleled demon emperor from 1,000 years ago was sealed under the Sky Pillar sect's 9-dragon spirit vein. This was a matter from 1,000 years ago, and the four great sects only had a history of 300 to 500 years. How could they know? Moreover, this was the Sky Pillar sect's biggest secret, and it definitely couldn't be leaked. Not only did the four great sect masters not know, but even the Heart Moon sect, Pill Cauldron sect, and Six Unity sect, who were on good terms with the Sky Pillar sect, didn't know about this matter. Just as everyone was filled with fear and didn't know what to do, a series of muffled rumbling sounds came from outside the Sky Pillar sect. Accompanied by the earth-shaking sounds, there were also strange cracking sounds, like the crisp sound of two bones rubbing against each other. Countless people subconsciously turned their heads and looked at the valley and plains outside the Sky Pillar sect. They saw a large group of gray skeletons surging like a tide, rushing into the Sky Pillar sect as fast as the wind. Every white skeleton emitted an icy aura of death, and their eyes flickered with dark green flames. Tens of thousands of ghost skeletons converged into a sea of white bones, and wherever they went, a monstrous gray fog and ghostly chi would roll up. Flowers, plants, and trees were drowned by the gray fog and ghostly chi, and immediately turned into black dust. Not a single blade of grass grew on the ground. The martial artists of the various sects were swallowed by the sea of skeletons, and in the blink of an eye, they were turned into dregs. Not even a complete bone could be found. Those ghost skeletons killed anyone they saw, and didn't care which sect or power they belonged to. The ghost skeleton army didn't even let a single living thing go, and turned everything they passed into ruins of death. The people of the various sects immediately revealed looks of shock, and their eyes widened in horror. Many disciples were trembling in fear, and the hot blood and fighting spirit in their hearts all disappeared. However, an even more terrifying scene appeared. Behind the ghost skeleton army, there were 10 teams shrouded in demonic fog and bloody light. In each team, there were over 100 demon warriors who were as strong as iron towers and brimming with killing intent. 10 valiant demon generals led over 1,000 demon warriors, waving long swords and large sabers, and roaring excitedly as they charged into the Sky Pillar sect. Kill! Kakik, the ground is covered in blood, flesh, and corpses. Blood! I smell the fragrance of blood. Don't stop me, I'm going to kill as many lowly humans as I want today. It's been a long time since I've slaughtered. My large saber will drink blood today. Those excited and manic shouts were the portrayal of the hearts of the demon warriors. At present, the sky of the Sky Pillar sect was filled with demonic clouds, and the ground was full of devastation. Everywhere was a battlefield with rivers of blood. To the human race, this was a tragic and harsh battlefield and hell. But to the demons, this place was like heaven. What they pursued in their lives, what they desired the most, was this slaughterhouse like hell. In a short moment, the 10 demon teams split up and charged toward the 4 peaks of the Sky Pillar sect. Brothers, little he is going to release a new chapter today. I guarantee at least 25 chapters, please support. Chapter 461. Thousands of demon warriors were incomparably ferocious, cruel, and bloodthirsty. They charged into the battlefield without fear of death, laughing maniacally as they brandished their swords and sabers, killing anyone they saw. The disciples of the various sects were scared out of their wits. They ran away in a panic, screaming miserably. Those disciples who couldn't escape in time were all hacked to death by the demons. They were either cut in half or minced into pieces of meat. Along with the blood-curdling screams, a dark red rain of blood splashed out and sprinkled down from the sky. Many demons were bathed in fresh blood, laughing maniacally in excitement. Some demons even picked up the corpses on the ground and opened their mouths to drink the fresh blood. Such a world-shocking, savage, and terrifying scene caused the disciples of the various sects to be terrified to the point their bodies went limp and their souls almost left their bodies. Finally, the elders of the various sects came back to their senses. They roared hysterically and furiously, constantly giving out orders. Retreat! All disciples, stop attacking immediately. Retreat, retreat! Hold your ground. Don't run away in a panic. Everyone, work together to resist the skeleton army and the demons. We have to leave the Sky Pillar sect as soon as possible. The plan has failed. Everyone, conserve your strength as much as possible. Don't get entangled with the demons and skeleton army. Many elders and deacons desperately resisted the attacks of the ghosts, skeletons, and demons, covering the retreat of the sect's disciples. At this point, the four great sects' plan had been completely destroyed. They couldn't care less about exterminating the Sky Pillar sect. The invasion of the ghost army and the demon warriors turned them into clay bodhisattvas crossing the river. They couldn't even protect themselves. Unfortunately, there were too many people in the various sections. They couldn't evacuate in a short time. Thousands of ghosts and skeletons surrounded the various mountain peaks in the blink of an eye, leaving the people of the four great sects with nowhere to retreat. They could only retreat to the mountain peaks and resist the attacks of the demons and skeletons with all their might. But even so, the number of disciples of the various sects was still decreasing at an extremely fast speed. Saber lights and sword shadows that blotted out the sky collided, erupting with muffled bangs. The white bone blades and the demons' broadswords and sabers slashed the bodies of the disciples of the various sections. Muffled sounds rang out as blood splattered all over the sky. Broken corpses fell into puddles of blood one after another, then were chopped into pieces by the ghouls and skeletons. Under the massacre of the ghost army and the demon clan, the people of the four sects trembled in fear. Their hearts were filled with grief, anger, and despair. Not long ago, their morale was high as they besieged the Sky Pillar sect disciples. At that time, when they saw the Sky Pillar sect disciples' terrified and despairing expressions, they felt very happy and proud. But now, they were 10 times more terrifying and despairing than the disciples of the Sky Pillar sect. This was retribution. Just as the ghost army and the demon race warriors were massacring the warriors on the four mountain peaks, a surge of surging gray ghost chi flew over from the distant sky. A short and skinny old woman wearing a black robe and holding a dagger-headed walking stick stood in the middle of the hazy ghost chi. It was Granny Ghost. She stepped on the limitless ghost chi and flew above the Sky Pillar sect, overlooking the battlefield from above. She saw that the Sky Pillar sect was in chaos. Flesh and blood were flying everywhere, and the flames of war lingered. Seeing the overwhelming advantage of the ghost army and crazily slaughtering the disciples of the various sects, she grinned and let out a sinister laugh. Kakik. After today, there will be no more Sky Pillar sect. When His Majesty the Demon King reappears in the world, the Star Ancient Realm will also become the limitless ghost realm. This old woman has been hiding for 100 years, and there's no need for me to hide anymore. I can finally be conferred the title of king and become a meritorious subject under the Demon King. Granny Ghost sneered proudly and revealed a look of deep anticipation. She formed a seal with her left hand and waved her dagger-headed walking stick with her right hand, sprinkling dark green flames that covered the sky and poured down on the ghost army. Many of the skeletons that had been shattered by the warriors of the various sects immediately gathered together and crawled back up. At this moment, a furious roar filled with killing intent suddenly came from behind her. Granny Ghost. It's really you, you lowly slave. Granny Ghost's expression suddenly changed. She turned around and saw an old man in a purple robe rushing over from not far away. After seeing the old man's appearance, Granny Ghost's eyes suddenly turned gloomy and she sneered. Xiang Wuji, we meet again. This old woman has been thinking about you for many years. Later, this old woman will refine you into a puppet and make you serve me like a dog. Xiang Wuji's left hand was holding a dark golden compass, and his right hand was holding a fiery red heavy sword that was as wide as a palm. His entire body exuded a furious killing intent. Granny Ghost, you damned lowly slave. Back then, this old man was careless and let you escape with your life. I didn't expect that after a few decades, you would actually summon the ghost army to attack my Sky Pillar sect. Today, this old man will tear you into pieces and eradicate you, you insidious lowly slave. After saying that, Xiang Wuji waved the fiery red heavy sword in his hand and used the flying star sword technique to attack Granny Ghost. Red Dragon Flash. Xiang Wuji shouted in a low voice and slashed out a 30-meter-long fiery giant sword toward Granny Ghost. The fiery light lingering on the sword condensed into a divine dragon phantom and burst out with a terrifying power that could destroy heaven and earth. Seeing the red dragon flash, Granny Ghost sneered. Xiang Wuji, it's been a few decades, but you haven't made any progress. You really disappoint this old woman. As she said that, she waved her dove-headed walking stick and shot out blue soul fire that covered the sky and earth. The soul fire condensed into a huge light blade and fought with Xiang Wuji in the sky. On the summit of the Sky Pillar Peak, more than 200 surviving disciples, guards, and deacons of the Sky Pillar sect were gathered in the square. When the ghost army and the demon army had attacked the Sky Pillar Peak, Ji Tianqing had set up a temporary defensive array. He used a golden light shield with a radius of 100 meters to protect more than 200 people. Everyone hid in the golden light shield and temporarily blocked the attack of the ghost army and the demon army. 12 deacons and 2 elders worked together to support the defensive array and kept injecting true essence into the light shield. The other disciples and guards were either lightly or heavily injured. They were recuperating and treating their injuries. At least 700 to 800 ghost skeletons and more than 100 demon warriors were surrounding the defensive array and attacking fiercely. The white bone blade and the blood light sword shadow bombarded the golden light shield one after another, producing muffled bangs, causing the shield to tremble continuously. Although the golden light shield's defense was very strong and would not be broken in a short time, it was still very weak. However, when the disciples and guards in the formation saw the barrier trembling and the white skeletons crowding outside the formation, they were filled with fear and terror. Fortunately, Ji Tianqing had not left yet and was crazily slaughtering the ghost army and the demon army in the square. Requesting monthly votes. Brothers with monthly votes, please vote. Chapter 462. The Spectre Army had the advantage in numbers. There were more than 10,000 of them, but their strength was not strong. Ji Tianqing's figure flashed in and out of the Spectre Army. Every time he swung the black dragon sword, a sword ray would fill the sky, and he would be able to kill more than 20 skeletons. The hundreds of devil warriors attacked him ferociously, but they could not even touch the corner of his clothes. In just 100 breaths of time, Ji Tianqing had killed more than 200 skeletons and more than 40 devil warriors. Even the 5th-level Origin Corps stage devil general, who led the hundreds of devil clansmen, was killed by him with Crimson Dragon Flash. The remaining 50 devil warriors were so scared that they fled the square and chased after the people of the Tianjian sect. The devil clansmen fled in fear, but the spectre skeletons did not have any intelligence. They continued to attack Ji Tianqing without fear of death. Ji Tianqing fought with the spectre skeletons for a while more before he realized something was wrong. The ghost skeletons that had been shattered by him actually reformed and got up to join the battle once more. The spectre skeletons were immortal. Granny Ghost, that damn old thing. She must be the one controlling the spectre army. Ji Tianqing frowned. His face darkened, and his eyes flashed with cold hatred. He raised his head and looked at the sky. He saw Xiang Wuji and Granny Ghost fighting fiercely in the sky not far away. Xiang Wuji extended a pair of 5-colored wings and turned into a 5-colored streamer. He shuttled back and forth in the sky as he fought with Granny Ghost. He held the dark gold compass in his left hand and released a dark gold light shield to block Granny Ghost's attack. He waved the heavy sword in his right hand and constantly slashed out huge sword rays that covered the sky, forcing Granny Ghost to retreat. Granny Ghost kept shooting out her blue soul fire, which condensed into sword rays and saber rays, as well as phantoms of demons and ghosts. She fought with Xiang Wuji. Furthermore, she continued to sprinkle jade-green flames onto the army of ghosts. The shattered specter skeletons immediately reformed their bodies and charged into the battlefield without fear of death. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing was filled with anger as he muttered, "Only by killing Ghost Granny can we completely destroy those ghost skeletons." He immediately condensed a pair of wings with his Kenshin battle robe and flew up to the sky like a shooting star, attacking Granny Ghost. Granny Ghost was currently defending against Xiang Wuji's violent attacks. She also had to divert her attention to control the ghost army on the ground. She was already in a precarious situation. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing quietly flew behind Granny Ghost and suddenly activated his killer move. Sword of Judgment. In order to kill Granny Ghost with one strike, he activated the sword embryo in his abdomen. The sword embryo transformed into a 10-meter-long golden sword, fiercely thrusting toward Granny Ghost. The huge golden sword emitted a dazzling golden light. The golden light condensed into a pair of wings, as if it had attached wings to the huge sword. This trump card of Ji Tianqing's contained a peerlessly sharp and terrifying might. Once the golden sacred sword was unleashed, thousands of soldiers would flee. No one could stop it. All evil spirits would be judged and their sins would be reduced to ashes. Therefore, he named this killer move, Sword of Judgment. Swoosh! The golden sacred sword instantly pierced through the sky, traversed hundreds of meters, and hit Granny Ghost. Just as Granny Ghost sensed that something was wrong and was about to dodge, her figure was drowned by the golden sacred sword. Bam! A deafening explosion erupted, shaking the heavens and the earth, spreading over a radius of more than 10 miles. The dazzling golden light lit up the sky that was filled with dark clouds. It was as dazzling as the sun. The violent shockwave of the golden light spread out like ripples in the sky. Xiang Wuji, who was closer, was also shocked by the terrifying power of the golden sacred sword. He quickly retreated hundreds of meters away. After a while, the huge golden sacred sword flew back to Ji Tianqing. It shrunk into a thumb-sized sword embryo and went back into his body. The golden light dissipated, revealing Granny Ghost's figure. Caught off guard, she was sent flying thousands of meters away by the golden sacred sword. She was still alive. Ji Tianqing and Xiang Wuji were shocked. They finally saw Granny Ghost's true strength. However, although Granny Ghost was not dead, she was severely injured. It was a horrible sight. Her dagger-headed walking stick shattered into pieces, and the black robe on her body disappeared as well, revealing a short and skinny body that was as thin as a stick and as short as a monkey. Her hair was messy, and her right arm and leg were gone. Her bones were exposed, and black blood was dripping from her wounds. Even on her back, there was a bloody hole the size of a bowl. Light could be seen from the front and back of her body. She was severely injured, but she was still able to gather the ghastly ghost chi and stand in the sky. Seeing Granny Ghost's injured state, Xiang Wuji could not help but smile coldly. Hee, crazy woman, it's time for you to die. Then, he looked at Ji Tianqing, who was not far away, and smiled approvingly. Tianqing, well done. Ji Tianqing smiled and said playfully, it's because you cooperated well. If you didn't hold her back, it wouldn't have gone so smoothly. Xiang Wuji stroked his beard and smiled proudly. Yes, of course. Your swordsmanship has reached perfection, and it's all because I taught you well. Ji Tianqing smiled mockingly and nodded. Yes, that's why my sneak attack was successful. Xiang Wuji frowned and said, don't talk nonsense. I didn't teach you how to sneak attack. Granny Ghost, who was not far away, saw Xiang Wuji and Ji Tianqing chatting casually. She was furious, and her body was filled with murderous intent. She bent her back and stared at Ji Tianqing with her dark green eyes. Her eyes were filled with hatred as she cursed, Ji Tianqing. You damned reptile, bastard. I regret that I didn't kill you in Yanling City. I let you live until now. Ji Tianqing looked at her coldly and sneered. Hee, if you could kill me, how could you let me escape? In this world, powerful people don't have the power to decide life and death. Just like now. Although you have the power of the Sky Origin stage, you can't do anything to me. Instead, you are going to be killed by me. Granny Ghost was filled with anger and resentment. She stared at him viciously. You little bastard, don't be so smug. In a moment, you will die a miserable death here, and your corpse will become this old woman's puppet, allowing me to command and destroy you. She cursed viciously and was about to turn into a wisp of ghost energy and flee. However, Xiang Wuji was prepared for this. His figure flashed a few hundred meters away and blocked her path. You bitch, you want to leave? Naive. Xiang Wuji sneered with murderous intent. He waved his sword and slashed out dozens of sword lights, which covered Granny Ghost's ghost chi. Granny Ghost was forced to stop. She had to use her blue soul fire to block Xiang Wuji's attack. Bang, bang, bang. After a series of muffled sounds, the blue soul fire was shattered. Granny Ghost was also screaming in pain. There were more wounds on her body. She was even more severely wounded. At the same time, Ji Tianqing arrived not far from her. He and Xiang Wuji surrounded her. He will update 15 chapters first. I will update 10 chapters this afternoon. Please support me. Recommendation tickets, rewards, and monthly tickets. I want all of them. Chapter 463. When Granny Ghost saw that she couldn't escape, she gave up. Even in such a desperate situation, she still sneered, her eyes full of contempt and pity. He. So what if you kill me together? You will die too. You will be buried with me soon. I brought the ghost army and the demon warriors here. Have you never thought about where the Blood Demon King went? Hearing this, Ji Tianqing and Xiang Wuji's faces changed, and their hearts skipped a beat. Previously, the two of them were busy fighting against the experts of the four major sects, so they didn't notice if the Blood Demon King had appeared. Moreover, the four peaks of the Sky Pillar sect were besieged, and the surrounding area was a battlefield. No matter how capable the two of them were, they couldn't monitor the situation of the entire battlefield at all times. Ji Tianqing immediately reacted and shouted anxiously, "Oh no! The Blood Demon King must have sneaked into the underground cave to destroy the seal." Xiang Wuji's face turned green with anger. He shouted, "Tianqing, I'll leave this to you. I'll go stop him." When Granny Ghost saw their reactions, she laughed arrogantly and proudly. Ha ha ha. Xiang Wuji, don't you think it's too late to think of the seal now? Half a month ago, the Blood Demon King sacrificed his daughter, Shuiyu, and planted the soul-devouring curse in the Nine-Dragon Spirit Vein. Today, the spiritual chi in the Nine-Dragon Spirit Vein has been completely devoured, and the Spirit Vein formation is about to collapse. Now that the Crimson Cloud Peak has collapsed and the seal is in pieces, what can stop the Demon King from breaking the seal? If I'm not wrong, the Blood Demon King should have rescued the Demon King by now, right? When the Demon King reappears, all of you will die without a burial place. Granny Ghost looked in the direction of the Crimson Cloud Peak, her eyes full of anticipation. Ji Tianqing and Xiang Wuji's faces became very ugly, and their hearts were filled with anger and killing intent. Xiang Wuji released his spiritual sense to check the situation of the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. He said with grief and indignation, "It's over. The spiritual qi of heaven and earth has indeed become extremely thin. Without the support of spiritual energy, the spirit vein grand formation has already collapsed. The power of the spirit vein grand formation is completely gone." Granny Ghost sneered again, "Ha ha ha. Xiang Wuji, are you desperate now? So what if I die? The Sky Pillar sect and the entire Star Ancient Realm will become a living hell. All of you will be buried with me. Ha ha ha." Seeing her laugh so viciously, Ji Tianqing was furious. His eyes flashed with killing intent. "Even so, I'll kill you first, you vicious old witch." As he roared, his entire body surged with scarlet true fire. His body merged with the true fire, forming a giant flaming sword. The blazing red flames condensed into the shadow of the vermilion bird. It released a divine majesty and a domineering aura that could destroy everything. Holy Vermilion Bird Sword. The vermilion bird's phantom wrapped around the giant flaming sword, bursting out with incomparably violent power. Along with the earth-shattering flames, it slashed toward Granny Ghost. Boom! In the deafening explosion, Granny Ghost, who did not have time to dodge or escape, was smashed into pieces on the spot. The ghostly aura that surrounded her was also incinerated by the ferocious scarlet true fire. Although Granny Ghost had many tricks up her sleeves, she was only a heavenly origin realm elite. She had not crossed the heavenly origin realm and could not survive as a soul. Once her physical body was smashed into pieces, she was completely dead. After Granny Ghost was killed, the ghost army on the battlefield below became frenzied and chaotic. They had no intelligence or spirituality. Without a leader, they could only charge forward mindlessly until they were smashed into pieces by the experts of the various sections. After they were killed, they turned into dried bones. Without Granny Ghost's secret technique, they would not reform. As a result, the ghost army's numbers began to dwindle. The pressure on the martial artists of the various sects also lessened. Xiang Wuji looked down at the battlefield from high up in the sky. After seeing the situation on the four mountains, he made a prompt decision. "Tianqing, I will go to the underground demon's cave now. You go and gather everyone. If the demon breaks through the seal, you take everyone and escape." Xiang Wuji was in the middle of explaining his plan when he was interrupted by a sudden loud noise. Boom! The deafening explosion instantly spread throughout the entire Sky Pillar sect. The ground within dozens of miles was shaking. A huge pillar of black fog suddenly rose from the ruins of the Scarlet Cloud Peak and shot up into the sky. The ruins that were hundreds of meters high suddenly exploded and turned into dust that scattered everywhere. The pillar of black fog that shot up into the sky merged into the black clouds. After a while, it condensed into a huge demonic face that covered the sky. The demonic face had a radius of 15 miles. It had scarlet eyes, and its facial features and bloody mouth were clearly visible. It looked down at the entire Sky Pillar sect. When it saw the thousands of people on the mountains, it immediately laughed wildly. So many flesh, blood, and souls. What a delicious meal. I need the flesh and blood of you worms to condense the demon emperor true body. Ha ha ha, the rumbling demonic sound, which was as deep as thunder, spread out for hundreds of miles. As he spoke, the demonic face released an overwhelming black fog that enveloped an area with a radius of dozens of miles. In the blink of an eye, half of the Sky Pillar sect turned into hell. It was dark and without light. The thousands of people on the battlefield were trapped in the demonic fog. They all looked terrified and hopeless. The disciples of the various sects were also shaken by the demonic voice. Their souls trembled, and they screamed in fear. Even the elders and deacons of the various sects were so scared that their faces turned pale. They broke out in cold sweat. For a moment, the people of the 5 sects were in extreme fear. They were scared out of their wits by the demon emperor's face in the sky. Only Ji Tianqing and Xiang Wuji flew up into the sky without fear. They faced the demon emperor's face directly. The two of them were exuding a soaring battle intent and killing intent. They were surrounded by fierce flames. Xiang Wuji glared at the demon emperor's face and shouted with killing intent, "Demon Emperor! So what if you've broken the seal? You're a great devil who's full of evil. You have been sealed for thousands of years. Now you only have less than 10% of your strength left. Today, even if all the disciples of the Sky Pillar sect die here, we will kill you." Ji Tianqing's face was cold. He glanced at the 4 mountains indifferently and looked at the powerhouses of the various sections. He said in a deep voice, "Tianjian sect, Thousand Autumn sect, True Martial sect, and Wind Fire sect. What you have done today will make you go down in history in infamy. You will bear infamy forever. 1,000 years ago, this unparalleled demon emperor killed countless people in the Tianshan region and was sealed here by an expert. Now that you have besieged my Sky Pillar sect, the unparalleled demon emperor has broken the seal and reappeared in the world." At this point, Ji Tianqing shouted coldly, "My Sky Pillar sect will be destroyed, but you will also be destroyed here. The entire Star Ancient Realm and the Tianshan region will be slaughtered by the demon emperor until rivers of blood flow." Ji Tianqing's roar of anger as he channeled his qi into his body spread to a radius of dozens of miles. The people of the various sects finally understood the truth of the matter. Suddenly, the powerhouses of the 4 sects felt a trace of regret in their hearts. They wanted to overthrow the Sky Pillar sect for their own benefit and gain more power, resources, and status. However, the demon clan and the human clan had a blood feud that was irreconcilable. They were mortal enemies. Today, they killed their way into the Sky Pillar sect. They were the culprits who had caused the people of the Tianshan region to suffer. They were sinners who should be nailed to the pillar of shame. Chapter 464. The reappearance of the Demon King filled everyone from the 4 great sects with regret. If they had known that the Demon King would reappear, how would they have dared to join forces to attack the Sky Pillar sect? The people from the Thousand Autumn sect, True Martial sect, and Wind Fire sect were especially regretful. They had been bewitched by the Tianjian sect and wanted to follow the Tianjian sect to destroy the Sky Pillar sect and change the situation in the ancient star realm. But now, not only did they not reap any benefits, but their 700 to 800 elite disciples, deacons, and elders were going to die in the Sky Pillar sect. This was a devastating blow. Gao Yi and the Thousand Autumn sect master were already dead. Only the True Martial sect master and the Wind Fire sect master were left. The two of them were filled with regret and only wanted to escape the Sky Pillar sect with the few hundred disciples who had survived. However, thousands of specter skeletons and hundreds of abyss devils were still madly attacking them. The area within a few dozen miles was completely sealed off by the demonic fog. They wanted to escape, but it was impossible. At this moment, Ji Tianqing shouted angrily, "The Demon King has reappeared. It's too late for you to escape now. If you want to live, you have to attack the Demon King with all your strength and kill him. Only by killing the Demon King can you wash away your sins." How could the 2,000 survivors of the 4 great sects not understand this? However, they were not willing to listen to Ji Tianqing's command. They silently resisted the attacks of the ghost army and the demons, secretly looking for an opportunity to escape. At the same time, the Demon King's giant face in the sky stared at Ji Tianqing and laughed sinisterly. He. Little guy, you really know how to bewitch people. Unfortunately, in the face of absolute power, any struggle or resistance is useless. All of you will become my dinner. Don't even think about escaping." After saying this, the Demon King's giant face opened its mouth and spat out a cloud of demonic fog at the hundreds of disciples of the Thousand Autumns sect. Whoosh! The black demonic fog that covered the sky immediately enveloped the Thousand Autumns sect disciples, drowning over 200 of them. Everyone immediately let out terrified screams and struggled desperately. However, these people's bodies were corroded by the demonic mist in the blink of an eye. Their flesh and blood essence were all devoured. In just 10 breaths, the flesh, blood, and souls of more than 200 people melted like snow, turning into skeletons on the ground. Most of these 200,000 Autumn sect disciples were at least at the 7th level of the true element stage. There were even 3 deacons of the Thousand Autumn sect amongst them, and their strengths had reached the 4th or 5th level of the origin core stage. However, even with that being the case, they were completely powerless to resist the demonic mist emitted by the Demon Emperor. Seeing this scene, the hundreds of people in the surroundings were filled with horror. They were scared out of their wits. Even a Yuan Dan expert was unable to withstand a mouthful of the Devil Emperor's demonic mist. Just how powerful was the Devil Emperor? Immediately, everyone's hearts were filled with shock and despair. They all screamed and fled in all directions. The flesh, blood, and souls of more than 200 people were condensed into dark red blood pillars, flying into the sky and surging into the giant face of the Devil Emperor. After the Devil Emperor devoured dozens of blood-red light pillars, his strength began to recover rapidly, and he became even more bloodthirsty and brutal. The giant face of the Devil Emperor once again spat out a cloud of demonic mist that covered the sky, and it poured down on the people of the Wind-Fire sect. Instantly, the hundreds of people of the Wind-Fire sect were so frightened that they fled for their lives, screaming in terror. More than 100 people could not escape in time, and they were immediately drowned by the demonic mist. In just a short moment, these people were all corroded into skeletons by the demonic mist. Their flesh, blood, and souls turned into blood-red light pillars that flew into the giant face of the Devil Emperor. The Devil Emperor's strength continued to increase, and the demonic clouds in the sky became more and more solid. The demonic mist barrier that covered dozens of miles of heaven and earth became even more indestructible. At this moment, a huge figure that was more than 10 feet tall flew out from the ruins of the Crimson Sky Peak. This person was the Blood Devil King. His body was as sturdy as a black bear, and there was a pair of wide blood-red wings on his back. He flew into the sky with a proud expression on his face, and he loudly ordered the hundreds of Devil Clan warriors to launch a frenzied attack. Looking at the mess on the battlefield, and the scene of flesh and blood flying everywhere, he raised his head and laughed out loud. Ha ha ha! Lowly human worms, tremble under the demonic might of the Devil Emperor. I have schemed for 100 years, just for today. All of you must die, and become sacrifices for the Devil Emperor to restore his true body. Just as the Blood Devil King finished speaking, a furious roar came from behind him. Blood Devil King! You bastard, your death is not to be regretted. The Blood Devil King turned his head and saw Xiang Wuji waving his sword angrily at him. Xiang Wuji! You old thing, you still dare to come and die. I will grant you your wish. The Blood Devil King sneered coldly. He waved his palms, and a blood-red light shot out to meet Xiang Wuji head-on. Bam! 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 The bloody light that filled the sky collided with the sword light, causing a loud, muffled sound and a violent burst of energy. Xiang Wuji and the Blood Devil King immediately engaged in an intense battle. However, the Blood Devil King was slightly stronger than Granny Ghost, and was almost on par with Xiang Wuji. Both of them burst out with their strongest fighting strength. Light splashed in the sky, and loud sounds shook the sky. In a short time, it was difficult to determine the winner between the two. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the Devil Emperor continued to release demonic mist to devour the flesh and soul of the disciples. As his strength continued to increase, the Devil Emperor's huge face gradually condensed half of a pitch-black beast. That was his true body. Ji Tianqing also quietly landed on the Jade Sword Peak and quickly set up a defensive array. More than 100 disciples and guards of the Sky Pillar sect on the Jade Sword Peak survived. They all hid in the defensive array and kept injecting power into the array to resist the siege of the ghost skeletons and the devil race. Not long after, more than 100 disciples of the Sky Pillar sect who survived on the Twin Moon Peak also fled to the Jade Sword Peak and entered the defensive array. 5 elders and more than 20 deacons supported the defensive array with all their strength, temporarily blocking the siege of the ghost skeletons and the devil race. Even the demonic mist spat out by the Devil Emperor was blocked by the defensive array. Ji Tianqing warned the elders and left the Jade Sword Peak, taking advantage of the chaos to fly back to the Sky Pillar Peak. At the inner sect plaza on the Sky Pillar Peak summit, more than 200 people were hiding in the defensive array that Ji Tianqing had set up. The remaining 100 people on the Great Peace Peak also fled to the Sky Pillar Peak under the protection of the elders and more than a dozen deacons. Everyone hid in the defensive array to temporarily avoid the siege of the ghost skeletons and the devil race. For elders and more than 20 deacons worked together to support the array. In a short time, the power of the array would not be exhausted, nor would it be broken through. After all, Ji Tianqing's attainments in the array Dao were very high. The defensive array he set up was a Heaven Origin Great Array. The people of the 4 great sects also imitated Ji Tianqing and worked together to set up a defensive array. They also wanted to use the array to resist the siege of the ghost skeletons and the devil race, as well as the demonic mist released by the Devil Emperor. However, the Tianjian sect master Gao Yi and the Thousand Autumns sect master were both dead. The surviving elders and deacons were unable to set up a Heaven Origin Great Array and could not resist the corrosion and devouring of the demonic mist. As the Devil Emperor released more and more demonic mist, the people of the Tianjian sect and the Thousand Autumns sect were corroded into bones, and their numbers rapidly decreased. In a short 100 breaths of time, 80% of the people of the 2 great sects had been devoured by the Devil Emperor. The remaining 100 or so people were utterly defeated and fled in all directions in fear. Not long after, these people were also killed by the ghost skeletons and the devil race. Chapter 465. The Tianjian sect and the Thousand Autumns sect were almost completely annihilated. In comparison, the True Martial sect and the Wind Fire sect were luckier. The sect masters of the 2 sects hurriedly gathered their disciples. With the help of a few elders and deacons, they quickly set up a defensive array. However, before they could finish setting up the Heaven Essence Array, the Demon King targeted them. Streaks of black demonic fog poured down toward the thousands of people from the 2 sections. Thus, batch after batch of disciples struggled in the demonic fog, screaming miserably as they turned into white bones. The sect masters and elders of the 2 sects had no choice but to work together to defend against the Demon King's attack and protect the surviving disciples. Their resistance and counterattack immediately angered the Demon King. "You lowly reptiles, it's your honor to be able to become this emperor's sacrifice and contribute to this emperor's revival. How dare you defy my will? I'll let you know what cruelty is. I'll let your souls suffer endless torture." The Demon King let out a sinister laugh in anger. He used the black clouds in the sky to form countless black pillars of light that poured down like a rain of arrows toward the people from the 2 sections. Boom! 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 Instantly, countless people from the 2 sects were killed or injured. Broken limbs flew everywhere. The 2 sect masters were also seriously injured, and they were forced to retreat again and again. After Ji Tianqing settled the people from the Sky Pillar sect, he flew back to the sky and joined forces with Xiang Wuji to attack the Blood Demon King. Xiang Wuji and the Blood Demon King had already exchanged hundreds of blows. Both sides were covered in wounds, but there was still no clear victor. Ji Tianqing wanted to use the same trick again and attack the Blood Demon King from behind like how he attacked Granny Ghost. Unfortunately, the Demon King had sealed off the surrounding area. Heaven and earth were filled with demonic aura. The Blood Demon King was like a fish in water in this gloomy demonic domain. He could use the demonic aura to control the situation. He had already sensed Ji Tianqing when he flew into the sky and was secretly on guard. After forcing Xiang Wuji back, the Blood Demon King retreated hundreds of meters away. He stared at Ji Tianqing with bloodshot eyes. Ji Tianqing, it asked in a cold voice. You little bastard, do you still remember Blood Moon? Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and sneered. Of course I remember. I've already killed her. So? The Blood Demon King's face twisted in anger. Dark red flames of killing intent surged out of his body as he angrily shouted, when Blood Moon died, this king swore that I would take your head and blood as a sacrifice to her soul in heaven. Today, I will avenge Blood Moon, you will pay me back 10 times over. Ji Tianqing looked at Blood Demon King coldly and shouted Blood Demon King, he shouted, Demon King. Let's see if you have the ability. As soon as he finished speaking, he did not wait for the Blood Demon King to make a move and took the initiative to attack. Sword, sword, sword. Golden light gushed out of Ji Tianqing's body. His body merged with the golden flame and turned into a giant sword that was more than 10 meters long. Suddenly, the golden flames lit up the dark sky and dispersed the black fog. The flames condensed into the divine beast White Tiger. It released a destructive power and slashed at the Blood Demon King. Swoosh! The golden sword carried a domineering sword intent and instantly arrived in front of the Blood Demon King. The Blood Demon King sneered. A bloody light surged out of his palm and condensed into a bloody blade. He slashed at the sword. Hee, even Xiang Wuji can't do anything to me. You little, however, his words stopped abruptly halfway through. Boom! Amidst a deafening explosion, the White Tiger sacred sword actually shattered the giant bloody blade and sent him flying backwards. While he was still rolling in the air, a long and deep wound appeared on his abdomen. Purple blood splattered everywhere. At the same time, Xiang Wuji, who had been waiting for a long time, also silently arrived. 5 Cheese Unification. Sky Abyss Sword. Xiang Wuji used the secret technique of 5 Cheese Unification to double his combat power temporarily. He held the black sword with both hands and raised it above his head. He slashed out 100-meter-long sword light. That enormous 5-colored sword light contained a terrifying power that could cut through everything. Even a 1,000-meter-tall mountain would be split open by this sword. A bottomless abyss would also appear on the ground. Boom! The 100-meter-long giant sword tore through the dark sky and slashed at the Blood Demon King. There was a deafening sound. The giant sword wrapped around the Blood Demon King and slashed down from the sky into the ruins of the Crimson Cloud Peak. The 100-meter-tall ruins were split in half. A 10-mile-long dark ravine appeared. It was like an abyss. The abyss was riddled with cracks that spread out in all directions. The ground within a 10-mile-long radius trembled. The 4 nearby mountains shook violently. The deafening sound spread across a 10-mile-long radius and reverberated between heaven and earth. Endless clouds of dust rose into the air, covering the sky within a radius of over 10 miles. Such a terrifyingly powerful strike shocked everyone on the spot. Even the demonic king's giant face in the sky looked over and stared at Xiang Wuji coldly. After a long while, the earth-shattering sound dissipated. From the 10-mile-long dark abyss, there was a soft rustling sound. A huge black shadow was crawling out. The next moment, a pitch-black beast that was 100 meters long and as large as a hill crawled out of the abyss. It was a ferocious beast that was as strong as a black bear. It had a few rows of spikes on its back and 4 black wings. It had 8 thick and short legs growing from its abdomen, as well as a huge bloody mouth filled with sharp teeth. Without a doubt, this ugly and ferocious beast was the real body of the Blood Demon King. It was already heavily injured, lying on the ruins, gasping for breath. There was a 10-meter-long sword wound on its abdomen. White bones could be seen. Black blood kept pouring out of the wound. This was the result of Ji Tianqing using the White Tiger Sacred Sword. The most serious injury on its body was the huge gully on its back that almost cut it in half. In the 30-meter-wide wound, its spine and countless white bones could be seen clearly. There were also colorful organs. Endless black blood poured out of the wound like a flood. It flowed into the dusty ruins and dyed the ground black. This terrifying wound was caused by Xiang Wuji's sword strike. Just a little bit more and the Blood Demon King would have been split into 2 halves. It struggled to stand up on the ruins. Black demonic fog surged around its body and wrapped around the terrifying wound. Although the demonic clan had strong self-healing abilities, the Blood Demon King would not be able to recover from such an injury without a few months of recuperation. The Blood Demon King raised its head and looked at the sky. Its red eyes stared at Xiang Wuji with a venomous look. However, before it could speak, the demonic king's giant face in the sky shouted coldly. "Blood Demon King, stand down. I want to kill these worms with my own hands. Brothers, where are the monthly tickets and rewards?" Chapter 466. The Demon King's roar reverberated in the sky. All the survivors on the battlefield looked up at the sky. They could vaguely make out a gigantic, pitch-black beast that was thousands of feet tall in the Demon King's enormous face. The giant beast did not have a head. It looked like a giant ape with 6 arms, 4 broad wings on its back, and a tail that looked like a dragon's tail. Just from its size alone, it could be seen that it had the power to destroy the world. When Ji Tianqing saw the appearance of the headless beast, his expression changed and his pupils constricted. The beast's appearance was very familiar to him. In the memories of the Sword God, the unparalleled demon that was suppressed by the Sword God looked exactly like this. The only difference between the two was that one was headless and the other had 2 heads. After pondering for a while, he realized that it must be because the Devil Emperor had not absorbed enough flesh, blood, and soul, and thus could not condense a complete true body. At this moment, the Demon King had already killed all the people from the Tianjian sect and the Thousand Autumn sect. 80% of the people from the True Martial sect and the Wind Fire sect had also been killed. However, the flesh and blood of more than 2,000 people from the 4 great sects had only allowed the Demon King to form a body. When the Demon King killed all the people from the Sky Pillar sect, he would be able to form 2 heads and form a complete body. At that time, no one would be able to match the Demon King. The Sky Pillar sect would be destroyed, and the people of the ancient star realm would be plunged into misery and suffering. Worms, die. The Demon King's enormous face let out a muffled roar. The 1,000-foot-tall Demon King waved its 6 muscular arms and shot out 12 pitch-black pillars of light toward Xiang Wuji and Ji Tianqing. Whoosh! 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 12 pillars of demonic chi streaked across the sky, carrying with them the power to destroy everything in their path. Xiang Wuji and Ji Tianqing's expressions changed, and fear appeared in their eyes. Before the pillars of demonic chi reached them, an invisible, terrifying pressure pressed down on them, making it difficult for them to move. At this critical moment, Xiang Wuji unleashed a vast amount of vital energy and poured it into the dark gold compass, activating this treasure with all his might. Primal Chaos Everlasting Array. The dark golden compass emitted a dazzling golden light, forming a huge golden light formation that blocked Xiang Wuji's head. Inside the formation diagram, which was glowing with golden light, there were countless runes and symbols that operated as fast as lightning, releasing a powerful defensive power. Ji Tianqing also resisted with all his might. His golden wings wrapped around his body, completely enveloping his body. In the next instant, 12 beams of demonic qi struck the two of them, drowning their figures. Boom! With a muffled boom, Ji Tianqing and Xiang Wuji were enveloped by the demonic light and fell from the sky to the ground, smashing deep into the ground. A huge crater with a radius of 10 li was blasted into the ground, which was already full of cracks and scars. It was like an abyss. Boom! An earth-shattering boom exploded, reverberating between heaven and earth. It was truly deafening. The ground in a radius of dozens of li shook violently. With the crater as the center, dense ravines extended out in all directions. The 4 nearby mountains shook incessantly, on the verge of collapsing. Countless cracks appeared. Endless dust and dirt flew into the sky along with the billowing demon qi, spreading in all directions. Everything in a radius of dozens of li became dark and murky. It was almost impossible to see anything with one's eyes. In the 1,000-meter deep crater, Xiang Wuji and Ji Tianqing were lying at the bottom of the crater. Xiang Wuji's dark golden compass had fallen into the ruins. Its golden light had dimmed a lot, and its power had decreased by more than half. He struggled for a while before he got up. He circulated his energy to shake off the dust on his body. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. With a horrified expression, he cursed, "Damned devil emperor, how can he still have such terrifying strength after being sealed for 1,000 years?" At this time, Ji Tianqing also stood up and shook off the dust and debris on his body. Seeing that he was not injured and only looked pale and sweaty, Xiang Wuji was relieved. Xiang Wuji looked up at the demonic emperor in the sky and said in a serious tone, "The demonic emperor's real body is 80% complete. His power is quickly recovering. Now that he has just broken out of the seal, he is at his weakest. We must destroy his real body as soon as possible. Otherwise, when he completes his real body, all of us will die, and the Tianshan region will be completely destroyed." Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "That's right. We cannot let the demonic emperor recover completely. We must find a way to destroy his real body." With that, the two of them flew out of the crater and into the sky. At the same time, the demonic emperor's giant face in the sky stared at the two of them with its blood-red eyes. You two lowly worms are actually still alive?" The demonic emperor let out a thunderous roar, his tone full of shock and disbelief. Obviously, it couldn't believe that Xiang Wuji and Ji Tianqing were able to block its attack with their insignificant strength. The devil emperor's cold gaze swept past Xiang Wuji and landed on Ji Tianqing. He immediately stopped. When he realized that Ji Tianqing had not reached the ethereal stage and was only at the original elixir stage, his eyes were filled with shock and disbelief. He had just broken out of the seal and was at his weakest. He was not even 10% as powerful as he was at his peak. Xiang Wuji was at the ethereal stage. It was understandable that he could block the demonic emperor's attack without dying. However, Ji Tianqing was only at the original elixir stage. How could he block the demonic emperor's attack without being injured? This was too inconceivable. The devil emperor stared at Ji Tianqing for a moment and immediately noticed something. He muttered in a low voice, "I seem to have seen this kid somewhere before. Why does his aura feel so familiar?" The blood demon lord, who had retreated far away, used his spiritual consciousness to report to the demonic emperor, "Your Majesty, that kid's name is Ji Tianqing. He has the bloodline of the Kenshin." Back then, this subordinate captured him and prepared to extract his sword god bloodline as an offering to His Majesty the Demon Emperor. Who would have thought that in the end, all my efforts would be for naught and that brat would escape? What? The bloodline of the Kenshin? The demonic emperor's giant face was filled with rage. Its blood-red eyes were filled with hatred and murderous intent. The bloodline of the Kenshin. I see. That damned Kenshin. That bastard deserves to die. He sealed me for 1,000 years. Even if I killed him 10 times, it would not be enough to appease my hatred. The demonic emperor roared angrily. His roar was so loud that it shook the heavens and earth. It stared at Ji Tianqing and growled with an excited and bloodthirsty tone, "Little bastard, you actually have the bloodline of the sword god. That's great. I will devour you completely. Not even your bones will be left. Your sword god's bloodline is the perfect offering that I've been longing for. Once I devour the bloodline of the Kenshin, I will be able to recover." Chapter 467. 1,000 years ago, the demonic king had been unstoppable in the Tianshan region. It was Kenshin who had suppressed him for 1,000 years. The demonic king had been tortured for 1,000 years. The anger and hatred in his heart had reached its peak. The person he hated the most was Kenshin. He could not wait to kill Kenshin a few hundred times. Now that he had seen Ji Tianqing, who had the bloodline of Kenshin, he was naturally excited. He was extremely cruel and bloodthirsty. He. I want to devour the bloodline of Kenshin. First, I will collect some interest. As he spoke, the demonic king waved his 6 thick arms. He stirred up the dark clouds in the sky and formed 12 blinding pillars of blood flame. Little worm. You can die now. Your flesh, blood, essence, and bones will all be offered to me. The demonic king roared. He waved his 6 huge arms and shot the 12 pillars of blood flame at Ji Tianqing and Xiang Wuji. Whoosh! 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 The 12 pillars of blood flame fell from the sky. They were so powerful that they could destroy the heavens and earth. They lit up the sky and earth with blood-red light. Everything within a few dozen miles was turned into a boundless sea of blood. It was as terrifying as purgatory. The terrifying pressure, like a mountain, covered the sky and earth. It suppressed Xiang Wuji and Ji Tianqing. The two of them were surrounded by a vacuum. There was no air at all. They could not breathe at all. The terrifying suppressive force was like an invisible quagmire. The two of them were trapped in it. They could not move, no matter how hard they struggled. There was no way they could escape. This time, the demonic king had used all his strength. The 12 pillars of blood flame were even more powerful than the previous 12 pillars of demonic qi. Ji Tianqing and Xiang Wuji's expressions became extremely serious. Their nerves were stretched taut to the extreme. 5 elements seal, everlasting chaos. Xiang Wuji let out a low roar and unleashed his most powerful qi to activate the dark golden compass with all his might. Boom! The dark golden compass immediately expanded and turned into a giant golden compass with a radius of 10 meters. It floated above his head and rotated rapidly. The Tianyuan Grand Formation in the compass was fully activated, releasing a dazzling 5-colored brilliance, forming a huge 5-colored light wall to protect him. Tianqing, come here quickly. At this moment of life and death, Xiang Wuji's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He wanted Ji Tianqing to hide under the 5-colored light wall with him and fend off the demonic emperor's attack. However, it was already too late. Ji Tianqing could only erupt with his full strength, pouring endless quintessential essence into the golden wings. He tried his best to spread his golden wings and wrap them around his body to protect himself. This was already his limit, the strongest defense he could rely on. Boom! 12 pillars of crimson flames descended from the sky and struck Ji Tianqing and Xiang Wuji with devastating force. The endless crimson flames engulfed the two figures like a flood. Ji Tianqing was hit head-on by a pillar of crimson flames. His golden wings trembled violently, making a buzzing sound as the golden light flickered. He was enveloped by the pillar of crimson flames and fell from the sky again, crashing heavily onto the ground below. Xiang Wuji's five-colored light wall could not block the attack of the crimson flames and was shattered into pieces. Even the huge dark golden compass collapsed into countless pieces and splashed in all directions. Boom! Boom boom! The 12 pillars of crimson flames landed on the ground below one after another. There was an earth-shattering explosion, causing the surviving warriors to feel dizzy and see stars. Between the heaven-raising peak and the Jade Sword Peak, the forest within a radius of 5 kilometers was instantly blasted into a dark abyss, so deep that the bottom could not be seen. The dense forest and towering trees, as well as the huge rocks and dust within a radius of 5 kilometers, all melted under the overwhelming crimson flames. Even a small portion of the foot of the Jade Sword Peak was destroyed by the violent shockwaves and collapsed. A huge crack appeared on the Jade Sword Peak. The entire mountain shook violently and was about to collapse. Such destructive power scared everyone out of their wits, revealing expressions of extreme fear and despair. There were still several hundred survivors of the Sky Pillar sect on the towering Sky Peak and the Jade Sword Peak. Everyone looked down at the huge abyss between the two mountains and stared at the bottom of the dimly lit pit, revealing expressions of grief, indignation, and anxiety. Everyone's hearts were in their throats as they worried for Xiang Wuji and Ji Tianqing. Many people even shed tears as they silently prayed that Ji Tianqing and Xiang Wuji would not die. Right now, the two of them were the strongest of the Sky Pillar sect, the leaders and spiritual pillars of everyone. If the two of them were killed by the Demon King, no one would be able to stop the Demon King's massacre, and the Sky Pillar sect would be destroyed immediately. It was no exaggeration to say that the life and death of Ji Tianqing and Xiang Wuji was related to the life and death of everyone in the Sky Pillar sect. Yunyao, Yan, and many other elders and deacons all stared at the abyss between the two mountains, their hearts filled with worry and sorrow. Everyone knew that with Ji Tianqing and Xiang Wuji's strength, it was almost impossible for them to block the Demon King's all-out attack. But there was still a glimmer of hope in everyone's hearts. At this moment, the Demon King waved his 6 arms high in the sky, manipulating the black clouds to form a huge black palm. Keek keek. Little worm, I'm going to enjoy my dinner. Obediently offer up your Kenshin bloodline. The Demon King's huge face cracked a sinister smile as he manipulated the 1,000-meter-wide demonic cloud palm to grab at the abyss between the two mountains. The abyss was completely silent. Xiang Wuji and Ji Tianqing did not react at all. Clearly, even if the two of them were not killed on the spot, they were definitely heavily injured and on the verge of death. The enormous palm of the Nephilim Emperor would definitely be able to capture the two of them and kill them easily. Seeing this, the hundreds of people from the Sky Pillar sect were so angry that their eyes almost popped out of their sockets as they let out angry roars. No! Demon King! You're a great devil who is full of evil. Stop it. We can't just sit here and wait for our deaths. We're going to die anyway. Let's fight it out with the Demon King. Just as everyone was filled with despair and anger, a dazzling golden light suddenly lit up in the dark abyss. In the next moment, a giant golden sword that was 20 meters long suddenly flew out of the abyss. Swoosh! The gigantic golden sword was wreathed in torrential golden flames and exuded a domineering aura that could pierce through the heavens. The blazing golden flames condensed into a pair of gigantic golden wings, attaching a pair of wings to the giant golden sword. The giant sword soared into the sky and pierced toward the giant demonic cloud palm with an unstoppable momentum at a speed faster than the speed of an aurora. At the same time, a loud and righteous roar came from the abyss. Sword of Judgment. Demon King. You're full of evil and you're about to die. Chapter 468. The hundreds of people from the Sky Pillar sect were shocked and they heard the angry roar coming from the abyss. Everyone was familiar with that voice and could immediately tell that it was Ji Tianqing's voice. Indeed, When the judgment sword charged out of the abyss, a figure wrapped in golden light followed closely behind and charged into the dark sky. It was Ji Tianqing. When the crowd saw his figure that was as proud as a sword and as straight as a pine tree, they immediately burst into cheers of surprise. Seeing that he was unscathed and his aura was still as powerful and domineering as before, everyone revealed a relieved expression. Their hanging hearts finally settled back into their stomachs. However, no one noticed that Ji Tianqing's face was as pale as a sheet of paper, and there were traces of blood at the corner of his mouth. He had already suffered serious injuries. However, with his indomitable will and the undying faith in his heart, he still persevered and retaliated angrily in a hopeless situation. In just a short breath, the judgment sword that he had formed from the sword embryo met the demonic cloud giant palm head-on. Boom! The demonic cloud giant palm and the golden light giant sword collided violently, and there was a loud explosion that shook the 9 heavens. A huge hole was pierced through the demonic cloud giant palm that covered the sky and the sun, and it completely collapsed and exploded. A violent force burst forth, enveloping the endless demonic cloud giant palm and spreading in all directions. Instantly, the 2 mountains closest to it were also shaken by the shockwave. High in the sky, the demonic emperor's huge eyes revealed a look of astonishment. With a ferocious expression, he shouted coldly, "You're not dead, you worm. You're just a primal core realm ant, yet you can block my killer move. Does the Kenshin bloodline really have such heaven-defying power?" The more monstrous Ji Tianqing's performance was, the more the demonic emperor's hatred grew. He gnashed his teeth in anger. However, something that made him even more furious happened. After Ji Tianqing used the judgment sword to shatter the demonic cloud giant palm, he actually continued to charge into the sky and charged at the demonic emperor without fear of death. He flapped his golden wings and flew into the sky. He actually controlled the judgment sword to unleash an even more powerful force and stabbed at the demonic emperor's huge face. Shwa! The sword of judgment cut through the dark night sky, sprinkling down endless golden light, illuminating the surroundings. The demon emperor's giant face was 30 miles in radius. It was simply too big, and there was no way to dodge. However, the devil emperor's giant face was formed from boundless black clouds. It was as if it was real, tough, and its defense was extremely strong. Boom! Amidst the deafening noise, the sword of judgment ruthlessly stabbed into the Nephilim emperor's giant face. Suddenly, the entire demonic face began to distort violently, becoming extremely ferocious and terrifying. The indestructible sword of judgment had blasted a massive hole in the demon emperor's face that was over a kilometer in radius. The devil emperor continued to release demonic clouds in an attempt to mend the hole. However, the sword of judgment was spinning at an extremely fast speed, bursting out a peerless power, and fiercely tearing the hole, making it bigger and bigger. Not only that, but the sword of judgment was also trying to pierce through the demon emperor's giant face and kill his true body. The devilish sovereign was instantly enraged, and he roared in a frenzied manner, "You worm! You lowly and ugly reptile, how dare you attack this emperor? You must be tired of living." The devilish sovereign's voice was like thunder. Immediately, he waved his 6 giant arms and slammed them towards the sword of judgment. It wanted to smash the judgment sword into pieces, then kill Ji Tianqing, and devour him until not even dregs were left. Bam, bam, bam. The overwhelming blood-red palm shadows blasted onto the sword of judgment. The giant golden sword was instantly blasted back. The golden light flickered, and its power was significantly weakened. Ji Tianqing, who was standing in the sky, had a sudden change in expression. He couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. PFFF, the giant golden sword was his sword embryo. When the sword embryo was damaged, he was also severely injured, and his injuries were even more severe. Dark clouds surged out of the hole on the demonic emperor's giant face, quickly mending the hole. Ji Tianqing couldn't be bothered to wipe off the blood at the corner of his mouth. He clenched his teeth and unleashed the remaining 40% of his strength into the giant golden sword. Swoosh! The 20-meter-long giant golden sword suddenly grew a little longer. It was almost 30 meters long, and it lit up with a dazzling golden light again. Sword of Judgment. Break! Ji Tianqing roared in a hoarse voice. He controlled the giant golden sword with all his might and unleashed an unstoppable force towards the devilish sovereign's giant face again. Bam! The giant golden sword hit the devilish sovereign's giant face again and tore open a huge hole that hadn't healed yet. The devilish sovereign's giant face twisted again, and endless black clouds surged and churned. Ah! You bastard, you deserve to die. The devilish sovereign was completely enraged. The giant face let out a thunderous roar that shook the heavens and earth for dozens of miles. It unleashed a powerful demonic power, causing the giant face to shrink rapidly. In the blink of an eye, it had shrunk to a radius of 10 miles. After the devilish sovereign's face shrank, the black clouds became more solid, and its defensive power increased by 3 times. Just as the Sword of Judgment was about to pierce through the devilish sovereign's face, it was blocked by the black clouds. However, Ji Tianqing's vital essence had been depleted, and he couldn't increase the power of the Sword of Judgment. He couldn't break through the black clouds at all. The giant golden sword was stuck in the devilish sovereign's face, trembling violently and making a buzzing sound. Ji Tianqing and the devilish sovereign were in a stalemate in the sky just like that. However, Ji Tianqing's vital essence had been depleted, and he was truly at the end of his rope. The injuries in his body couldn't be contained. His internal organs were all ruptured, and fresh blood gushed out. Even though he gritted his teeth and held on with his strong willpower, blood kept flowing out of his mouth. His injuries kept worsening, and he couldn't hold on any longer. The giant golden sword was trembling more and more, and its power was weakening. It was about to be swallowed by the devilish sovereign's giant face. At this critical moment, a figure in a purple robe flew into the sky and let out a low shout. Tianqing! Let me give you a hand. This person was Xiang Wuji. He had also been severely injured by the devilish sovereign. His body was covered in wounds, and his white hair and beard were stained with blood. Just now, he was circulating his energy to suppress his injuries. When he saw Ji Tianqing fighting the devilish sovereign alone and couldn't hold on any longer, he rushed over to help. Devilish sovereign! I'll fight it out with you. Today, even if the entire Sky Pillar sect dies here, we won't surrender. Xiang Wuji looked up at the devilish sovereign's giant face and roared tragically. Then, he activated all the true essence in his body and waved his hand to release a 5-colored light beam, which shot towards Ji Tianqing. Swoosh! After that dazzling 5-colored beam of light hit Ji Tianqing, it released a vast amount of vital essence that surged wildly into his body. Ji Tianqing was originally extremely weak and was on the verge of collapse and unconsciousness. When Xiang Wuji's vital essence surged into him, his vital essence was immediately replenished, and he pulled himself together. The giant golden sword stuck in the devilish sovereign's giant face suddenly lit up with a dazzling golden light and regained its power and luster. The Sword of Judgment regained its power and immediately broke free from the devilish sovereign's giant face. The giant golden sword no longer trembled, and the buzzing sound quickly dissipated. The giant sword exploded with a violent and domineering power, tearing a huge hole in the devilish sovereign's face that was about to close up. Endless devilish chi leaked out from that huge hole and poured in all directions, scattering in the sky. The devilish sovereign roared furiously and desperately waved his 6 giant arms to attack the giant golden sword. The giant sword was hit until golden light splashed everywhere. It swayed from side to side and showed signs of breaking. Chapter 469. That huge golden sword was Ji Tianqing's sword embryo. Ji Tianqing was also in great pain and injuries after the sword embryo suffered such a heavy blow. His body trembled non-stop as blood gushed out of his nose and mouth. Unfortunately, Xiang Wuji's cultivation was not enough to help him fight against the Demon King. The two of them were no match for the Demon King even if they joined forces. They still could not escape death. At the peak of the towering Sky Peak and the Jade Sword Peak, hundreds of disciples, guards, and deacon elders of the towering Sky sect looked up at the scene in the sky. Seeing Ji Tianqing and Xiang Wuji fighting a bloody battle and on the verge of death but still clenching their teeth and holding on, everyone's hearts were filled with grief and despair. Countless disciples looked at Ji Tianqing's figure and felt a deep sense of sorrow. They could not help but cry. Many people shouted, either cursing the Demon King's cruelty or praying for Xiang Wuji and Ji Tianqing. At this moment, Qian Yu and the little black dragon flew out of the crowd and into the sky. They shouted in unison, "Old Ji, we're here to help you." In the previous battle, Ji Tianqing had asked them to help the elders protect the disciples of the towering Sky sect. Therefore, they had always felt regretful that they were not able to join forces with Ji Tianqing to fight against the strong enemy. Now that they saw that Ji Tianqing was seriously injured, they did not hesitate to step forward. The two of them flew into the sky and released icy blue pillars of light, injecting vast and mighty power into Ji Tianqing's body. Ji Tianqing's true essence was replenished and his strength increased by a few degrees. Yunyao and Yan saw Ji Tianqing's tragic and blood-drenched appearance and tears welled up in their eyes. Yunyao, who had always been as cold as a fairy, was now tear-stained. Her beautiful face was filled with worry and anxiety. Seeing Ji Tianqing's blood-drenched body still putting up a desperate fight, she immediately rushed out of the defensive array. "Tianqing, let me give you a hand." Yunyao's voice was cold and her tone was firm. She reached out and pulled out the jade hairpin in her hair bun. After injecting her power into it, she transformed it into a pair of wings of wind and fire. Shua! She flapped her fiery wind wings and flew into the sky filled with devil chi. She channeled all her power and threw a palm strike at Ji Tianqing. Suddenly, a ray of silver-white moonlight gushed out from her palm and rushed into Ji Tianqing's body. Ji Tianqing's strength recovered slightly. However, this was far from enough. Even if Yunyao transferred all of her power to him, it would not be enough to help him resist the Devil Emperor. At this moment, Ji Ku also rushed out of the defensive array with tears streaming down his face. "Brother Tianqing, I'll help you too." When Ji Tianqing was fighting in the sky, she was busy protecting the Sky Pillar sect disciples and fighting the four great sects, the Ghost Army, and the Devil Race to the end. At this moment, she was already exhausted. Her hair was soaked in sweat, and her white robe had long been stained red with blood. Even so, she had to use her last bit of strength to fight side by side with Ji Tianqing. If Ji Tianqing was going to die here today, she would definitely not want to live. Then, Yan also stepped forward bravely and let out a firm and fearless roar with his tender voice. "Senior brother Tianqing, I also want to help you kill the Devil Emperor." Yan waved his palm and shot out a beam of flame light that flew toward Yunyao in the sky. The beam of flame light contained all of his power, which was transferred to Ji Tianqing through Yunyao. Seeing this scene, the Sky Pillar sect elders and deacons on the two mountain peaks all stepped out of the defensive array. Everyone looked up at the sky with a firm expression and roared tragically and resolutely. "Count me in to kill the Devil Emperor. Since we're going to die anyway, we swear to live and die with the Sky Pillar sect." The acting sect leader and the Grand Elder are fighting a bloody battle and disregarding their own lives. How can we live? Fight! Let's fight the Devil Emperor. Even if I die here, I want to die with a bang. How can there be an unbroken egg when the nest is overturned? We must unite as one to fight the Devil Emperor together. Together, the mountain becomes jade, and the earth becomes gold. Disciples of the Sky Pillar sect, let's attack together and help the acting sect leader kill the Devil Emperor. It's everyone's responsibility to eliminate the evil. One hot-blooded roar after another resounded from the two mountain peaks, shaking the heavens and the earth. The 9 elders and more than 30 deacons all released their majestic true essence. Rays of true essence of different colors hit Yunyao and Xiang Wuji in the sky one after another, and they transmitted their power to Ji Tianqing. Even the hundreds of disciples and guards who were hiding in the defensive array also channeled their true essence and transmitted it to the deacons and elders. At this moment, the hundreds of people of the Sky Pillar sect were united as one, and their will was as strong as an impregnable fortress. No matter how strong or weak they were, they all did their best to help Ji Tianqing and fight the Devil Emperor together. The power of the hundreds of survivors turned into countless colorful beams of light and flew into the dark sky. In the end, everyone's power passed through Yunyao and Xiang Wuji's hands and turned into 2 huge colorful beams of light that were injected into Ji Tianqing's body. With the power of several hundred martial artists gathered together, how powerful would that be? Ji Tianqing's power and aura immediately soared by dozens of times, reaching an extremely terrifying level. The endless true essence caused his body to swell violently, and he turned into a 5-meter-tall giant. The vast and mighty 5 elements origin energy lit up with a dazzling 5-colored light that revolved around his body, causing his figure to be as imposing as a god, sacred and dignified. The judgment sword that was formed by the sword embryo also grew to a length of 100 meters and released a terrifying power that could destroy heaven and earth. Ji Tianqing raised his head and looked at the enormous face of the Devil Emperor in the sky, then growled out with a resonant voice, "Sword of Judgment. Break!" Instantly, the judgment sword released an unstoppable aura and pierced through the Devil Emperor's giant face. The Devil Emperor's giant face that covered the sky was smashed into pieces by the giant sword and turned into black clouds that dissipated in all directions. Then, the judgment sword pierced the Devil Emperor's true body that was hidden behind the Devil Emperor's giant face. Bang! A deafening explosion rang out, spreading across a radius of dozens of miles. The sacred and dazzling giant sword shattered the Devil Emperor's 4 arms that were blocking in front of him and pierced into his chest. Instantly, the giant headless beast that was thousands of feet tall trembled and swayed under the attack of the judgment sword. There was a huge hole in his chest, and half of his body was covered in cracks. Endless blood gushed out and sprinkled in the sky. The Devil Emperor's true body had not been fully formed yet, but he was severely injured by Ji Tianqing's sword just like that. In extreme rage, he let out an earth-shattering roar with his divine soul. "Ah ah ah! Damn it! You beast, reptile, lowly ant, you actually dared to destroy my true body. You are dead meat. No one in this world can save you. I swear I will consign you to eternal damnation and make your soul suffer for 1,000 years." Ji Tianqing ignored the Devil Emperor's roar and withdrew the judgment sword. He shrunk it 1,000 times and kept it in his body as a sword embryo. He stood proudly in the sky and looked at the Devil Emperor's true body indifferently. Then, he slowly stretched out his right hand. With the help of the power of hundreds of people, he activated the mysterious black hole with all his might. Swoosh! The black hole in his palm flew tens of thousands of feet high into the sky, turning into a pitch-black whirlpool that blotted out the sun and covered the sky within a radius of 10 miles. Then, he let out a loud roar in an imposing manner. "Sword, come!" Suddenly, a pitch-black, ice-cold shadow of a gigantic sword flew out from the mysterious vortex that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. Slash! Chapter 470. At this moment, Ji Tianqing stood proudly high in the sky. His body was as imposing as a god, his white robes and golden battle robes fluttering in the wind. He was like a Kenshin descending into the world, his aura divine and tyrannical to the extreme. The several hundred people of the Sky Pillar sect looked up at his tall and mighty back, forever engraving this scene into their memories. High in the sky, a massive black sword that was 10,000 feet long and towered over the world came crashing down with an unparalleled momentum. This massive black sword exuded an endless chill of death. It was like the divine sword of the Grim Reaper, striking awe and fear in everyone's hearts. The demon emperor stood in the demonic clouds, looking up at the massive black sword crashing down from above. His body trembled as he roared in grief and indignation. "It's actually you. Burial of heaven. You." It was clear that the demon emperor had sensed the aura of the massive black sword and recognized its identity. That's right. This massive sword that towered into the heavens was the heaven-span sword steel in Kenshin's tomb. However, the demon emperor's roar came to an abrupt halt. The heaven-span sword steel instantly struck him, exploding with a resounding boom that shook the highest heavens. Bang! The already heavily wounded demon emperor's true body was instantly blasted apart by the heaven-span sword steel. Its thousands of feet tall body shattered into billions of pieces of flesh and blood, scattering in the sky within a radius of dozens of miles. After his true body was destroyed, the demon emperor turned into a mass of pitch-black demonic fog. This was his undying divine soul. However, the heaven-span sword steel had not only shattered his true body, but also suppressed his divine soul and smashed it into the ground. Boom! A heaven-shaking explosion reverberated through the entire Sky Pillar sect for hundreds of miles. In that moment, the ground for hundreds of miles violently trembled, rocking up and down. A pitch-black abyss that was over 10,000 meters deep and 30 miles wide appeared on the ground. Endless dust burst out, blotting out the sky for dozens of miles. The destructive shock waves caused more than half of the nearby 4 mountain peaks to collapse, nearly turning them into ruins. Half of the Sky Pillar sect was turned into a desolate ruin. Such destructive power and scene was simply not something a human could achieve. At the bottom of the dark abyss, the sky-reaching sword steel, which was thousands of meters tall, was suppressing the undying god soul of the devil emperor. The demonic emperor roared furiously and struggled with all his might. The heavenly sword steel shook violently, but he was unable to break free for the time being. Burial of heaven. You bastard! I've already been suppressed for 1,000 years. Don't even think about suppressing me again. The demonic mist surged wildly, and the furious roar of the devil emperor's soul could be heard from within. The heavenly sword steel remained silent as it continued to unleash powerful energy to suppress the demonic emperor's divine soul. But at this moment, the blood demon king rushed over. It twisted its mountain-like body and flew to the bottom of the abyss. It attacked the heavenly sword steel with all its might, trying to rescue the soul of the devil emperor. The demonic emperor stopped struggling and said to the blood demon king in a low and dignified voice, "Blood demon king, you told me before that as long as you can save me and revive my race, you will give up everything, including your life?" The blood demon king replied without hesitation, "That's right. Your Majesty demonic emperor, this subordinate is loyal to you and is willing to give up everything for you." "Very good." The demonic emperor shouted in a low and dignified voice, "Now, it's time for you to fulfill your promise and sacrifice for the revival of my race." With that, the demonic emperor's divine soul released a black mist that shrouded the blood demon king's body. Before the blood demon king could react, its mountain-like body was rapidly corroded and melted away. Its flesh and soul were devoured by the demonic emperor and turned into a dark red light that surged into the demonic emperor's divine soul. In just a few short breaths, the blood demon king's body had turned into a huge skeleton. After devouring its flesh and soul, the demonic emperor temporarily gained an incomparably powerful strength. Burial of heaven. Get lost for this emperor. The demonic emperor roared furiously and released a dazzling bloody light, igniting a monstrous bloody flame that fiercely blasted at the heaven-span sword steel. The power of the Blood Demon King's flesh and soul burst out and immediately sent the heavenspan sword steel flying. Swoosh! The heavenspan sword steel flew more than a dozen miles away and smashed into the cliff of the abyss, causing the earth and mountains within a radius of dozens of miles to shake. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the demonic emperor's divine soul released a bloody flame and flew out of the abyss as fast as lightning, fleeing into the distant sky. It used a secret technique of the demonic race and turned into a bloody stream of light. In the blink of an eye, it traversed dozens of miles in the sky and fled from the Sky Pillar sect. However, as it fled in panic, it did not forget to leave behind a furious roar filled with killing intent and resentment. Ji Tianqing. This emperor will remember you. Soon, when this emperor recovers, this emperor will return today's enmity 100-fold. The demonic emperor's divine soul's furious roar reverberated in the sky above the Sky Pillar sect. Unfortunately, Ji Tianqing could not hear these words. After he released his strongest trump card, without the support of the true essence of the others, he exhausted all his strength and mind and immediately fainted. His body suddenly shrank to its normal size and fell straight from the sky, smashing into the ruins below. The pitch-black whirlpool in the sky and the heavenspan sword steel in the abyss shrank countless times and flew back into his body. Seeing Ji Tianqing fall from the sky, Xiang Wuji hurriedly flew over to catch him. When he landed on the ruins and lowered his head to check Ji Tianqing's injuries, his expression immediately turned ugly. This was because Ji Tianqing's body was covered in dense cracks, and endless blood was gushing out, completely dyeing him red. His fleshly body was on the verge of collapsing like a cracked ceramic. Moreover, he no longer had a heartbeat and breathing. His body was like a corpse, and his body temperature was gradually dropping, about to become ice cold. Tianqing. Tianqing, wake up. You've already defeated the demonic emperor and he fled in a panic. Nothing must happen to you. Xiang Wuji hugged Ji Tianqing, whose body was gradually turning cold. His eyes were red as he roared, his body trembling. He did not want to accept or believe that Ji Tianqing had died in battle just like that. But the truth was right in front of him. Ji Tianqing's body was gradually turning cold, and his vitality had already dissipated. Xiang Wuji stood on the ruins, trembling as he raised his head. His eyes were bloodshot as he looked at the sky. His wrinkled old eyes were silently filled with tears. No! Heavens! Why are you so cruel? We fought to the end and finally defeated the demonic emperor, but Tianqing will never come back. Why? Does the heavens want my Sky Pillar sect to perish? Xiang Wuji roared hysterically at the sky. He used up all his remaining strength, and his voice was filled with grief, anger, and despair. This Sky Origin stage powerhouse had dominated the 9 regions of the southern continent for 200 years. He had seen countless storms and experienced countless deaths in his life. But in his life, he had never roared with such grief and anger as he did now. The number of times this eccentric old man had shed tears in his life could be counted on one hand. At this moment, he did not care about the dignity of a powerhouse or the demeanor of an elder. Finally, tears fell from his eyes. Men did not cry easily, unless they were deeply hurt. No one knew that every time Xiang Wuji scolded Ji Tianqing, his heart was filled with hope and expectation. When he mocked and ridiculed Ji Tianqing, his heart was filled with joy and pride. Moreover, no one knew that he saw Ji Tianqing as his own grandson and regarded him as the pride of his life. Chapter 471. The tragic and bloody battle had finally come to an end. Soon, the surviving disciples of the Sky Pillar sect left the Sky Pillar Peak and the Jade Sword Peak. Many elders and deacons, Yunyao, Yen, Ji Ku, Xianyu, and the little black dragon all heard Xiang Wuji's sorrowful cry. No one had the time to adjust their breathing or treat their injuries. They all rushed to Xiang Wuji's side as fast as they could. Grand Supreme Elder. What happened to Ji Tianqing? Tianqing. Everyone came to Xiang Wuji's side and saw his soulless and sorrowful appearance. They immediately had a bad premonition. Everyone's eyes fell on Ji Tianqing. Seeing him covered in blood and not breathing, everyone's hearts sank. Their expressions became solemn and sorrowful. Yunyao, Ji Ku, and Yen couldn't wait to rush to Ji Tianqing's side to check on his injuries. When Ji Ku and Yen sensed that Ji Tianqing's body was cold and his breathing was cut off, their expressions changed drastically and their faces turned pale. Yen's eyes widened in disbelief. She cried out in a sorrowful voice, "Senior brother Tianqing, he actually..." Qian Yu and the little black dragon stared at Ji Tianqing and cried out in shock, "Old Ji! Old Ji, what happened to you?" Ji Ku's pretty face was also as pale as paper. Her body stiffened on the spot, and large teardrops gushed out of her eyes. She reached out to caress Ji Tianqing's cold face and shook her head desperately. She cried out in grief, "No! This is impossible. Big brother Tianqing won't die." She had already exhausted her strength and mind. Suddenly suffering such a blow, her vision turned black and she fainted. When she heard Ji Ku say the word die, Yunyao froze on the spot as if she had been struck by lightning. Her expression changed drastically, and her heart instantly tightened. Her clear eyes revealed a look of disbelief and were covered with a layer of mist. It can't be. Tianqing will be fine. Absolutely not. Her eyes were fixed on Ji Tianqing's face, as if she was muttering to herself, but the clear tears in her eyes fell silently. At this moment, it was as if someone had grabbed her throat and heart. Her heartbeat and breathing had stopped. Even her mind had lost its ability to think, becoming completely blank. She couldn't bear such a heavy blow for a moment. Her throat heated up and she spat out a mouthful of hot blood. PFFF, when Yunyao was young in Cloud Spirit Palace, she had read many history books, biographies, and stories in her free time. There were many famous biographies that wrote of beautiful women who missed their husbands or husbands so much that they vomited blood day and night and died within a few days. At that time she simply could not understand it, nor was she willing to believe it. She only thought that the author of the book had deliberately made it up and exaggerated it. But now, she actually coughed up blood as well. She finally experienced the feeling of having her heart twisted by a knife, and the pain felt like it was being cut by a knife. She stared at Ji Tianqing and reached out her hands in a daze. She held his blood-stained and gradually cold face. Why? Why would you be so stupid? Everyone knows to seek benefits and avoid harm. But you stepped forward bravely and sacrificed your own life to protect the Sex Foundation? Yunyao murmured with a mournful expression. She seemed to have forgotten that she was in the ruins of a battlefield and that there were people around her. At this moment, there was only Ji Tianqing in her eyes. The elders and deacons around her were filled with sorrow. Their hearts were heavy as they shook their heads and sighed softly. The demonic clouds and haze in the sky gradually dissipated, and the setting sun gradually revealed itself, shining its warm rays on the ruins. However, the atmosphere was incomparably sorrowful and heavy. Xiang Wuji held Ji Tianqing and raised his head, trying his best not to let the tears in his eyes fall. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath to suppress the sorrow in his heart. He said in a hoarse voice, "Elders, let's arrange the deacons and disciples to clean up the battlefield. I'm going to take Tianqing to the spiritual medicine peak to send him on his last journey. He's a great hero of our Sky Pillar sect. He's the hero who saved the ancient realm of stars and the Tianqian region. Even if the heavens are jealous of his talent and let him leave like this, I'm going to let him leave in glory. I'm going to let the world remember what he did today and his achievements." Xiang Wuji clenched his teeth and almost roared those words. Then, He was about to leave with Ji Tianqing's corpse and go to the spiritual medicine peak. However, at this moment, Yun Yao, who had been looking sad, suddenly exclaimed. Her eyes shone brightly. Wait! He's not dead. Yun Yao suddenly discovered something. Her face was full of surprise, and her tone was excited as she shouted. Xiang Wuji, the elders, and the deacons' faces changed. Their eyes were filled with excitement. What? Tianqing's not dead? That's great. But Tianqing's aura is gone. Yeah, Tianqing's pulse and aura are gone. Yun Yao, we understand how you feel. Yun Yao ignored everyone's questions. She held Ji Tianqing's face with both hands and used some kind of secret technique. After a while, she sensed something and confirmed the result. Then, her tears turned into laughter. She said excitedly, that's right. Tianqing's not dead. I have the bloodline of the celestial spirit sacred body. I'm very sensitive to the soul aura of different races. I've checked just now. Tianqing's spiritual aura is still there. It's just that his injuries are too severe. After hearing what she said, everyone finally believed her. They were all very excited. Yen wiped away the tears in her eyes. She exclaimed excitedly, that's great. I knew Xixiang Tianqing would not die. Qian Yu and the little black dragon were also overjoyed. They flew in circles in the sky. I knew it. Old Ji is so lucky. How could he die so easily? Old Ji is so young. There's no way he would die so young. Xiang Wuji was so excited that his face was flushed. He was so excited that he could not speak properly. He nodded and said, good, good. As long as he's not dead. There's still hope if he's not dead. No matter how badly injured he is, this old man will do everything in his power to save him. Then, Xiang Wuji carried Ji Tianqing into the sky and rushed to the spiritual medicine peak. Yun Yao, Yen, Qian Yu, and the little black dragon also rushed to Xiang Wuji to help treat Ji Tianqing's injuries. The elders also ordered the deacons to lead the disciples to treat the injured, clean up the battlefield, and clean up the aftermath. Ji Ku, who had fainted from grief, was also brought back to the spiritual medicine peak by the spiritual medicine elder to treat his injuries. The sky was clear again. The blue sky, white clouds, and the setting sun reappeared. The gloomy and deadly aura brought by the demonic king finally disappeared. Chapter 472. 2 days quickly passed. The bitter and cruel battle destroyed more than half of the Sky Pillar sect. The Scarlet Firmament Peak and the 9 Dragon Spirit Vein were completely destroyed. The 4 mountains, including the Sky Pillar Peak and the Jade Sword Peak, were also almost destroyed. Such heavy losses dealt a heavy blow to the Sky Pillar sect. Next, the Sky Pillar sect would have to recuperate for at least a dozen years to slowly recover. Although the area within the Sky Pillar sect was still filled with craters and ruins, the fog had dissipated. However, the haze of the great battle had already dissipated, and the Demon Emperor had already fled far away. It was impossible for him to appear in the near future. More than half of the elders, deacons, and disciples had survived. As long as these mainstays were still there, the Sky Pillar sect would be able to hold on and survive this crisis. Now, all the survivors were temporarily staying on the Spiritual Medicine Peak and the Creek Peak. The palace at the top of the Spiritual Medicine Peak had also become a temporary meeting hall. It was early in the morning and the elders were having a meeting in the hall. Xiang Wuji sat at the head of the hall and presided over the meeting. Several elders stood in the main hall, their expressions and auras somewhat solemn and heavy. Xiang Wuji said with a solemn expression, First Elder, it has been 2 days since the battle. You were in charge of cleaning up the battlefield and dealing with the aftermath. What's the result? First Elder Mu Yunhai stepped forward and cupped his hands. Reporting to Grand Elder, this subordinate has already calculated the casualties of this battle. He raised his head and looked at Xiang Wuji before solemnly saying, in this battle, our sect lost a total of 5,800 people. 4,200 of them were odd-job disciples. After the battle began, Elder Chu and a dozen outer sect deacons quickly moved the outer sect disciples to the underground fortress. Therefore, the number of outer sect disciples who died was relatively low. Only 800 people died, and 3,100 people survived. The inner sect disciples participated in the battle and lost more people. More than 500 people died, and only 300 people survived. In addition, more than 300 guards died, 22 deacons died, and the 5th and 8th elders also died. Everyone listened to the first elder's report and heard the bloody numbers. Their hearts were very heavy. After the first elder finished, Xiang Wuji slightly nodded and said in a deep voice, our sect did suffer heavy losses in this battle. This is the heaviest disaster in the past 400 years. However, most of our disciples managed to survive. As long as people are still alive, there is still hope. We can rebuild the sect and slowly recover our vitality. At this time, Xiang Wuji continued to ask, Grand Elder, how are the casualties of the 4 great sects and the demons? This was a question that everyone was concerned about. Several elders hurriedly listened attentively. The great elder sneered and said hatefully, those bastards from the 4 major sects, they've really harmed themselves and others this time. They're digging their own graves. All the members of the Tianjian sect, including sect leader Gao Yi, guest elder Huangfu, and the 6 elders, as well as thousands of deacons, guards, and disciples, were all wiped out. Not a single person was spared. From the sect master to the elders, deacons, and disciples of the Thousand Autumns sect, over 700 people had all died. Not a single one of them had escaped. Almost all of the members of the true martial sect had died. After the battle, only a few dozen people had survived. But after I discovered them, I ordered them all to be executed. It was the same for the Wind-Fire sect. After the war, there were over 100 people who survived, but they were all executed by my order. These bastards deserved to die. They deserved to be cut into pieces. As for the thousands of demons, they were all killed in the chaotic battle. Hearing this, the elders nodded with hatred, expressing their approval of the great elder's actions. The people of the 4 major sects are the main culprits. They deserve to be killed. If our sect hadn't defeated the demon emperor, the ancient star realm and the heavenly stellar region would have been plunged into misery and suffering. The 4 major sects would have been sinners for all eternity. After this battle, more than half of the elites of the 4 major sects have been killed. They only exist in name now. I heard that the Tianjian sect is in chaos. Over the past 2 days, they've been fighting each other. Many of their disciples have fled. It's the same for the Thousand Autumns sect. The sect master and elders are all dead. The disciples are also fighting over the sect's property. After the elders finished their discussion, Xiang Wuji asked the great elder, are the sect masters of the true martial sect and the Wind-Fire sect also dead? The great elder nodded and said, although I didn't find their bodies, they only have tattered robes and armor left. They're also stained with blood. They should be dead. Xiang Wuji thought for a moment, then said murderously, it's fine. We don't have to worry about them for now. Once the sect is rebuilt, if they're lucky enough to survive, I'll personally find them and send them to hell. Alright, we still have to work hard for half a year to rebuild the sect. When Chu Tiansheng comes out of seclusion, I'll work with him to rebuild the spirit vein formation. After they finished talking about the sect matters, the several elders all fell silent. The great elder thought for a moment, then asked worriedly, Grand Elder, how's Tiansheng? Has he woken up? When he mentioned Ji Tiansheng's injuries, Xiang Wuji's eyes dimmed and his heart sank. He shook his head and said in a heavy voice, Tianqing's injuries are too severe. He's been attacked by hundreds of people. His physical body is already dead, and only a trace of his soul remains. Even though he's in deep sleep, we don't know when he'll wake up. With this old man's strength, even if we use up all of our sect's financial and material resources, we still won't be able to save him. After all, I'm only of the Sky Origin stage. I can only heal his physical body, but not his soul. I'm afraid only those who have surpassed the Sky Origin stage can heal him. At this point, Xiang Wuji could only sigh helplessly. The elders all frowned. Their expressions were grave as they discussed in low voices. His physical body is dead, and only a trace of his soul remains? Doesn't that mean he's a living dead? The heavens really don't have eyes. Tianqing is our sect's hero. He's our future hope. How can he be in such a state? God is jealous. The great elder sighed and asked, Grand Elder, what do you plan to do? In the entire Tianqin region, or even the entire southern region, it's impossible to find a cultivator above the Sky Origin stage. Could it be that Tianqing can only sleep in the secret room forever? That he can only live as a living dead? Xiang Wuji sighed and said in a heavy voice, right now, I can only use the best spiritual medicine to protect Tianqing's body. Chapter 473. Inside the Spirit Medicine Hall, in a secret room filled with spirit qi. A spirit qi gathering array was set up in the secret room. It gathered the spirit qi of heaven and earth, making the secret room full of spirit qi. There was an ice jade bed in the corner, emitting wisps of cold white mist. Ji Tianqing was lying on the jade bed peacefully with his eyes closed. He was motionless and did not make any sound. On the surface, there were almost no wounds on his body. However, his internal organs, meridians, and acupoints were almost all broken. Also, his skin was covered with fine cracks. In the past 2 days, Xiang Wuji had used all his strength and countless rare spirit medicines to heal his injuries. It was also because of this that the cracks all over his body were able to heal quickly and become more and more shallow. Perhaps in another 3 to 5 days, all the cracks on his body would be healed and disappear. In addition, the white robe that Ji Tianqing was wearing before was almost dyed red by blood. The white robe he was wearing now was clean and neat, as white as new. Last night, Yunyao helped him change into it when there was no one in the secret room. At this moment, other than Ji Tianqing, Yunyao was the only one in the secret room. She sat on the stone stool beside the jade bed and stared at Ji Tianqing. She had been guarding Ji Tianqing for 2 days and 2 nights. She did not leave him at all and almost did not sleep. Although she was exhausted and looked very tired and haggard, she did not want to leave. It was as if she was afraid that if she left, Ji Tianqing's soul would be extinguished and he would really leave her. In the 2 days that she stayed by Ji Tianqing's side, Yunyao had been thinking about 2 questions. When I saw Tianqing's aura disappear and his body die, why did I feel like my heart was being stabbed and I vomited blood on the spot? If no miracle happens to him, and he's like an ordinary person, where his physical body dies, he's truly dead. What should I do now? These 2 questions flashed back and forth in her mind. She thought about many things, including the first time she met Ji Tianqing and everything that had happened in the past 6 months. She even fantasized that in the future, if Ji Tianqing didn't wake up, she would always guard Ji Tianqing until the day he woke up. However, no matter how much she thought about it, she couldn't think of the answers to those 2 questions. Or perhaps, she already had the answer in her heart, but she was still unable to believe or confirm it. In short, for the past 2 days, Ji Tianqing was the only thing in her eyes and in her mind. Everything she saw and every thought that came to her mind was related to Ji Tianqing. This feeling was very strange. It was something that Yunyao had never experienced before in her life. At this moment, the stone door of the secret chamber creaked open. Xiang Wuji walked in. When he saw that Yun Yao was still sitting by the jade bed and protecting Ji Tianqing in a daze, he couldn't help but sigh silently in his heart. Tianqing, oh Tianqing, you're so lucky. Yun Yao is infatuated with you, and that girl Ji Ku is also dead set on you. If you still have a conscience, wake up quickly. At this moment, Yun Yao was awakened by the sound of footsteps. She quickly got up and bowed. Disciple greets Grand Elder. No need for formalities. Xiang Wuji waved his hand and said in a concerned tone, Yun Yao, Tianqing can only sleep now. It's useless for you to guard him here. Ever since the battle, you haven't rested at all. You didn't even treat your injuries. This can't go on. Yun Yao shook her head gently. Grand Elder, my injuries are fine. I just want to guard Tianqing. Sigh. Xiang Wuji couldn't persuade her and could only sigh helplessly. Yun Yao was silent for a moment. She pursed her thin lips and said in a serious tone, Grand Elder, disciple has been thinking about something for the past 2 days. I hope you can approve of it. What is it? Xiang Wuji raised his eyebrows. It has to do with Tianqing, right? Yes. Yun Yao nodded and said in a serious tone, Grand Elder, after Tianqing's injuries are stabilized, disciple wants to bring him back to Cloud Soul Palace in Zhongzhou. Perhaps the people in Cloud Soul Palace will have a way to wake Tianqing up. Of course, Xiang Wuji knew that Yun Yao came from Cloud Soul Palace. He also knew that Cloud Soul Palace was mysterious and powerful. It was one of the few ancient families in Zhongzhou. He only pondered for a moment and then nodded in agreement. Just now in the meeting hall, the elders also told me about this. Tianqing's injuries involve his soul. Even Sky Origin cultivators can't do anything about it. If you want to heal his injuries, only Sky Origin Transcendence and above can do it. Cloud Soul Palace is an ancient family. There must be many powerful cultivators and transcendents in the palace. If you bring Tianqing back to Cloud Soul Palace and let the transcendents treat him, he will be safe. This is your kind intention and also Tianqing's good fortune. I can't ask for anything more. Why would I stop you? Seeing that Xiang Wuji nodded in agreement, Yun Yao bowed and said, Thank you, Grand Elder, for your help. Xiang Wuji waved his hand to indicate that she could dispense with the formalities. He said in a serious tone, the journey to Zhongzhou is long. It will take at least a month. You must rest and recover your strength. Tianqing's physical injuries will take another half a month to heal. You should take advantage of this time to recuperate. Yun Yao understood this, but she was still worried. But if disciple goes to heal, who will take care of Tianqing? Just as Xiang Wuji was about to speak, a clear voice came from outside the secret room. Eldest senior sister, let me take care of big brother Tianqing. Yun Yao and Xiang Wuji turned to look at the door and saw Ji Ku walking into the secret room. That day, Ji Ku was too sad and fainted. She was unconscious for an entire night before waking up. For the past 2 days, she ignored her injuries and came to visit Ji Tianqing more than 10 times a day. However, Yun Yao stayed by Ji Tianqing's side. It was inconvenient for her to stay and avoid awkwardness. If that wasn't the case, she would definitely stay by Ji Tianqing's side without even blinking. Yun Yao nodded at Ji Ku and revealed a kind look. Junior sister Ku, I'll have to trouble you. Ji Ku shook her head and said sincerely, as long as big brother Tianqing can get better, I'm willing to do anything. It's not difficult at all. Yun Yao only nodded slightly and didn't say anything. However, her eyes dimmed a little, and a strange thought appeared in her mind. If only I could be as innocent and straightforward as Ji Ku. How nice would that be? Ji Ku muttered to herself. When she thought of this, she actually envied Ji Ku. She could love someone without any restraint. The matter of going to Zhongzhou's Cloud Soul Palace was settled. In the next few days, Ji Ku guarded Ji Tianqing. Yunyao returned to the secret room to heal her injuries and recover her strength. Chapter 474. Unknowingly, 10 days had passed. Now, the Sky Pillar sect had calmed down, and the situation in the ancient star realm had also stabilized. Several elders and many deacons were leading thousands of disciples to rebuild the sect in full swing. Yunyao had been cultivating in seclusion for 10 days. Her injuries had basically healed, and her strength had also recovered. Early in the morning, after she ended her seclusion, she immediately went to the secret room where Ji Tianqing was. When she entered the secret room, she saw that Xiang Wuji and Ji Ku were both there. Xiang Wuji was checking on Ji Tianqing's injuries, and his face was filled with surprise and joy. Although Ji Ku looked tired and was not in a good state of mind, he was also filled with joy. Yunyao quickly walked over and asked Xiang Wuji, Grand Elder, how is Tianqing's condition? Xiang Wuji's face was filled with disbelief, and he said excitedly, it's unbelievable. I thought that Tianqing's physical injuries would take at least half a month to stabilize. I didn't expect that his physique would be so special. It's comparable to a Sky Origin Realm cultivator, and it only took 10 days to stabilize. Hearing this, Yunyao was also surprised and happy. She carefully sized up Ji Tianqing and found that the fine cracks on his body had all disappeared. As expected. Yunyao nodded and said in a gratified tone, Tianqing has the Kenshin bloodline, and his physique is far stronger than ordinary cultivators. He also has a strong self-healing ability. At this time, Xiang Wuji continued, also, I can vaguely feel that Tianqing's soul is not asleep. He still has consciousness. His soul seems to be silently gathering strength and healing his injuries. Otherwise, his injuries would not have stabilized so quickly. After hearing Xiang Wuji's explanation, Yunyao became even more excited. She could not wait to bring Ji Tianqing back to Cloud Soul Palace. Ji Ku had a strange look in his eyes as he asked cautiously, Grand Supreme Elder, do you mean that big brother Tianqing's soul is still awake? Then if we speak beside him, won't he be able to hear us? Xiang Wuji thought for a moment and nodded, that's very likely. Ji Ku's little face instantly turned crimson red. She quickly turned her head to look elsewhere. Her gaze was somewhat evasive and filled with shyness. After all, during the 10 days that she had been guarding Ji Tianqing, she would often talk to Ji Tianqing. She had hidden the words in her heart for many years, words that she wanted to say but did not dare to say, all at once. When she thought that Ji Tianqing might have heard those words, she blushed and her heart raced. She couldn't control herself. Fortunately, Xiang Wuji and Yunyao's attention was on Ji Tianqing, so they didn't notice her abnormality. Yunyao checked on Ji Tianqing's injuries again. After confirming that Ji Tianqing's injuries were stable and there were no more problems, she said to Xiang Wuji, Grand Supreme Elder, since Tianqing's injuries have been stabilized, this disciple has decided to depart immediately. No problem. Xiang Wuji nodded in agreement. He waved his hand and sent out a ray of true essence into the frost jade bed. Immediately, the frost jade bed lit up with a dense white light. Soon, a change occurred. A moment later, the frost jade bed turned into a huge crystal-clear jade box, tightly protecting Ji Tianqing. As Xiang Wuji used a secret technique, the huge jade box that was over 3 meters long gradually shrank to the size of a palm. He handed the jade box to Yunyao and said with a serious expression, Yunyao, I'll leave Tianqing to you. Don't worry and go to the central state. I'll preside over the matter of rebuilding the sect. You don't have to worry about the sect. Just take good care of Tianqing. Yunyao accepted the jade box and put it away properly. Then, she said with a serious expression, Grand Supreme Elder, please don't worry. I'll do everything I can to save Tianqing. Ji Ku also looked at Yunyao with eyes full of hope. He said sincerely, "Eldest senior sister, I'll leave big brother Tianqing to you." Yunyao looked at her calmly and nodded silently. Then, Yunyao bid farewell to the two of them and left the secret room. Not long after, she rode the white crane spirit beast and left the Sky Pillar sect. She flew all the way to the north. From the Tianshan region to the central state, she had to cross tens of thousands of mountains and rivers. Even if the spirit crane rushed at full speed, it would take at least a month. After the spirit crane flew out of the star ancient realm, Yunyao sat cross-legged on the back of the crane and closed her eyes to rest. The next month would be a long and boring journey. It would make her extremely tired and haggard. In Kenshin's tomb, the vast space was still dark and cold. The pitch-black sword steel, which was thousands of feet tall, stood quietly in the wasteland. It was surrounded by surging spirit energy. Back then, in order to kill the demon emperor's true body and suppress his soul, the heavenly sword steel had used up a huge amount of spirit energy. Now, the burial of heaven was quietly recuperating and recovering its vitality. Below the sword steel, there was a white fog wrapped in a layer of five-colored spirit energy. It was attached to the heavenly sword steel. This white fog gently surged and occasionally condensed into a human figure, showing the appearance of a white-robed youth. There was no doubt that this was Ji Tianqing's soul white fog. After the battle with the demon emperor, his injuries were too serious and he almost died on the spot. At the critical moment, the burial of heaven sensed that something was wrong and swallowed his soul into the Kenshin's tomb, saving his life. Even so, his soul was severely injured and his strength was extremely weak. He could only rely on the sword steel to recuperate quietly. At this time, the soul white fog surged for a while and condensed into a palm-sized white person. It was Ji Tianqing. He frowned gloomily and muttered in a low voice, "Burial of heaven, although I can use my soul to comprehend and cultivate the 8th level of the path of the sword heart, the effect is too weak." The burial of heaven's voice came from the heavenly sword steel. The path of the sword heart is the perfect combination of sword skills and body refinement. It can only cultivate the body to the limit of the celestial being and condense the heart of the sword. Now that your soul is separated, you are lucky to be able to keep your life. How can you ask for more? Ji Tianqing sighed and said with some emotion, "Now that you are a remnant soul and I am a heavily injured soul, we are in the same boat." The burial of heaven was silent and speechless. Ji Tianqing continued, "Burial of heaven, I heard the Supreme Elder and Yunyao talk about it before. Only transcendence can heal my injuries. The transcendence they are talking about should be experts above the celestial origin realm, right? What realm is that? Why are they called transcendents?" The burial of heaven was silent for a while and then said in a low voice, "Now that you have experienced the situation of your soul being separated, I can tell you. The celestial origin realm is the limit that ordinary warriors can reach. When the strength of the body reaches the limit, it can delay aging and death, have a lifespan of 300 to 500 years, and can control the power of the 5 elements. If a celestial origin realm expert wants to go further, they have to surpass the limits of the body and cultivate to strengthen their soul. When the soul is strong enough, it can produce all kinds of inconceivable magical powers and have unimaginable strength and means. Therefore, this realm is called the soul refining realm, and soul refining realm experts are also called transcendents. Because they have surpassed the mortal realm and reached a whole new realm, their life level is higher and they are no longer bound by the aging and death of the body. As long as the soul is not destroyed, they are immortal." After listening to the burial of heaven's explanation, Ji Tianqing was shocked and yearned for it. He asked doubtfully, "In that case, doesn't that mean that soul refining realm experts are immortal? No wonder the demon emperor could still wreak havoc in the world after being suppressed for 1,000 years. The burial of heaven explained, "No, soul refining realm experts only live longer. Once the power of the soul is exhausted, they will die." Chapter 475. The burial of heaven's words made Ji Tianqing think of Kenshin. Even if one was as powerful as the sword god, he would still die. Thinking of this, his mood was as heavy as the burial of heavens. Both of them were silent. After a long time, the burial of heaven said in a low voice, "You and I are both remnant souls. I can't help you recover from your injuries. You can only wait for your lover to find a transcendent expert to save you. Only then can you recover from your injuries and leave this place. Before that, you should focus on cultivating the path of the sword heart and slowly recover from your physical injuries." Ji Tianqing nodded and said helplessly, "That's all I can do now." After that, the burial of heaven fell into a deep sleep again and silently recovered his vitality. Ji Tianqing continued to comprehend the 8th level of the path of the sword heart and subtly healed his physical injuries. Time flew by like a shuttle. A month passed quickly. That evening, the spirit crane was flying thousands of feet high in the sky, hurrying along as fast as lightning. Yunyao sat upright on the crane's back with her eyes closed. Her beautiful face and brows were filled with fatigue, and her mind was very haggard. After a month of continuous travel, she finally returned to Zhongzhou and entered the territory of Cloud Soul Palace. After flying for another 100 miles, she would return to Cloud Soul Palace, which she had been away from for a long time. Ever since she left Cloud Soul Palace and entered the Sky Pillar sect, she hadn't returned in all these years. Now, she looked down at the mountains and rivers below. Seeing the familiar mountains and primitive forests, she felt a little homesick. Her mood was a little complicated, and she couldn't help but have some thoughts in her mind. If I come back alone, father and mother will definitely be happy. But if I come back with Tianqing and ask mother to save him, I wonder how father and mother will react when they see Tianqing. She had always had a cold personality, like a fairy who didn't eat the food of mortals. Anyone who knew her would think that she would never do such a thing. After all, she didn't even look at the number one genius of the human race, the most honorable son of heaven, so how could she fall for other men? And now, she had returned with Ji Tianqing. This would definitely make everyone shocked and feel that it was inconceivable. After the news got out, there would be all kinds of speculations and rumors. Yunyao didn't care about other people's opinions, but she was worried about her parents' attitude and Ji Tianqing's injury. Unknowingly, the spirit crane had already flown hundreds of miles away. There was a 30 kilometers tall peak ahead that towered into the sea of clouds, and it stood towering in the boundless mountain range. Only then did Yunyao gather her thoughts and control the spirit crane to fly high into the sky. Shwa! The spirit crane passed through the vast sea of clouds high in the sky and flew to the sky above the sea of clouds. A dark green mountain peak could be vaguely seen amidst the boundless sea of white clouds in front of him. On the peak of the mountain with a radius of 100 miles stood a magnificent, majestic, and sacred palace. The towering palace that seemed to have existed since ancient times was none other than Cloud Spirit Palace. The setting sun high in the sky shone diagonally on Cloud Spirit Palace, reflecting thousands of 5-colored auspicious chi like a rainbow. The towering palace was enveloped by boundless spirit chi, and there were thousands of rays of sunlight surrounding it. Below the palace was a vast sea of clouds, making the palace look like a heavenly palace, a paradise for immortals. In front of the main entrance of Cloud Spirit Palace, there were 99 wide and flat green jade steps. On every step of the green jade steps, there were 2 guards in silver armor standing on the left and right sides of the steps. These guards had swords hanging from their waists, and their bodies were straight, exuding a majestic and solemn aura. Under the green jade steps, there was a huge square with a radius of 1,000 miles. The square's ground was paved with extremely tough sky gold stone, and it looked like huge golden bricks that shone with a brilliant golden light under the setting sun. On both sides of the square, there were 2 rows of huge statues that were hundreds of feet tall. There were a total of 8 statues, and they were all lifelike. There were both men and women. Every statue had an extraordinary aura, and the people that were carved all exuded a sacred and majestic aura. These were the statues of the Yun family's ancestors and the human race's ancestors, and they were for the disciples of Cloud Spirit Palace to worship and remember. At this moment, there were a few young disciples in embroidered clothes practicing martial arts on the huge square. These young disciples were only around 20 years old, and they were the disciples of the Yun family's side branch, so they had ordinary statuses. However, their abilities were all above the 7th level of the mystic enlightening realm. If they were placed in the various sects of the 9 regions of the southern land, they would be the elite disciples of their respective sections. When the spirit crane flew over from the sea of clouds and landed on the square, the young disciples immediately stopped their attacks and turned to look at the spirit crane. When they saw Yunyao jump down from the spirit crane's back, the young disciples immediately cupped their fists and bowed to Yunyao respectfully. "Greetings, eldest young mistress. Eldest young mistress is back. Greetings, eldest young mistress." Yunyao glanced at the crowd and ignored them. She kept the spirit crane in her jade pendant, then stepped onto the green jade steps and walked towards the entrance of the main hall. The 200 guards on both sides of the steps immediately knelt on one knee and bowed in unison. "Greetings, eldest young mistress." After Yunyao stepped through the main door of the palace and entered Cloud Spirit Palace, she passed through many corridors and halls and rushed towards Nebula Hall. Nebula Hall was an important place in Cloud Spirit Palace. It was the place where the Yun family's direct disciples cultivated in seclusion and treated their injuries. On the first floor of the palace, there were a large number of cultivation technique manuals and formation diagrams, as well as many historical books and biographies. On the second floor of the treasury, there were various precious elixirs and materials for refining elixirs and weapons. On the third floor of Nebula Hall, there were only 4 secret rooms used for seclusion and cultivation. These 4 secret rooms were made with top-grade materials and contained an alternate dimension, which was equivalent to a cave abode. Every cave abode had extremely dense heaven and earth spirit energy, and it was set up with a formation that surpassed the heaven origin level. It had extremely powerful effects. No matter if one cultivated in seclusion in the cave abode or circulated their cultivation technique to treat their injuries, they would get twice the results with half the effort. Of course, only the few dozen direct disciples of the Yun family had the right to use these 4 secret rooms. On the way to Nebula Hall, there were naturally countless maidservants and guards who bowed to Yunyao when they saw her. Yunyao did not stop. After hurrying to Nebula Hall, she directly went to the 3rd floor. She chose a secret room called Tranquil Sky and placed Ji Tianqing in the secret room. The formation set up in this secret room had the powerful effect of nourishing the soul and strengthening the soul. It was most beneficial for treating Ji Tianqing's injuries. Within Tranquil Sky was a piece of land with a radius of 100 miles. There was a lake, a large river that was like a jade belt, and a mountain that was thousands of feet tall with lush trees and abundant spirit energy. Halfway up the mountain, there was a 1,000-meter tall silver waterfall that flowed down. Chapter 476. The mountain was filled with spirit energy, and it was quiet and peaceful. It was truly a peaceful and undisturbed scenic spot. After Yunyao entered Tranquil Sky, she walked into a wooden hut at the peak of the mountain. The wooden hut was made of light brown requiem wood. It looked simple and mysterious, but it also had a unique charm. There was a large array set up in the wooden hut that constantly stimulated the power of the requiem wood, emitting invisible soul power fluctuations. Living in this wooden hut, one's soul power would increase rapidly, and one's injured soul would also be comforted and healed. The interior of the wooden hut was very simple. There was only a desk, a chair, and a wooden cabinet for storing books and herbs. Yunyao took out a jade box from her spatial ring and placed it in the wooden hut. Then, she waved her hand and used a secret technique, injecting majestic true essence into the jade box. The jade box immediately expanded to 3 meters long and quickly expanded, returning to the form of an icy jade bed. Ji Tianqing was still lying peacefully on the jade bed, surrounded by wisps of icy mist. Yunyao checked his injuries and was finally relieved when she found that his soul power was very stable. She opened the wooden cabinet and searched for herbs to nourish the soul, as well as books related to healing soul injuries. Although she did not have the corresponding strength to treat Ji Tianqing's injuries, she still had to do her best. However, she had to do everything she could to help Ji Tianqing strengthen his soul power with some simple methods. Soon, Yunyao found 2 soul-nourishing pills and fed them to Ji Tianqing. Then, she tried to activate a requiem array in the wooden hut. Just as she finished doing this, a gentle female voice came from the small courtyard outside the wooden hut. "Yao Yao, mother heard from the maidservants that you're back. Are you inside?" Hearing this familiar voice, Yunyao was stunned. "Mother, how did you find me so quickly?" She muttered in her heart and walked out of the wooden hut with a bit of apprehension. She saw a graceful woman in a long brocade dress standing in the small courtyard outside the door. This woman, who seemed to be in her 30s, was Yunyao's mother, Bailey Ningsu. She wore a long silver dress embroidered with flowers and a shawl with moon and stars stripes. His long black hair that reached his waist hung down like a waterfall behind his back, quiet and tame. She used a jade hairpin to tie her hair into a bun, wore a golden crown studded with gems, a light blue peacock pattern belt around her waist, and wore a pair of exquisite green jade white orchid shoes on her feet. With such an exquisite and luxurious outfit, her entire body was filled with a noble aura that made people look up to her. Moreover, Bailey Ningsu's figure was tall and slender, her face was beautiful, and her temperament was gentle and virtuous. At first glance, her figure and appearance were almost identical to Yunyao's. When the two of them stood together, they looked like a pair of twin sisters. However, both mother and daughter had different temperaments. One was as cold as ice, while the other was as gentle as an orchid. They each had their own merits. Yunyao walked to the center of the courtyard and came in front of Bailey Ningsu. She bowed and said, "Mother, why have you come personally?" Bailey Ningsu revealed a gentle smile and said in a gentle tone, "I heard from the maidservants that you've returned. Mother waited for a while, but you didn't come to greet me. I heard from the guards that you came straight to Nebula Hall after returning to Cloud Spirit Palace." As she said this, Bailey Ningsu reached out and stroked Yunyao's hair and bangs. Her face was full of love as she said, "You little girl, you rushed back from the heavenly stellar region. You didn't even rest before coming to Nebula Hall. Mother was worried that something might have happened to you, so I rushed over to take a look. Mother, I'm fine." Yunyao's heart was slightly warm as she slightly lowered her head. Originally, she was still a little apprehensive and hesitant about when to tell her mother about Ji Tianqing. Seeing that her mother was still as gentle and caring as before, she gathered her courage and said, "Mother, since you've come to Tranquil Sky, I have something I need your help with." Bailey Ningsu shook her head and said with a smile, "Yao Yao, if you have any problems, Mother will naturally help you solve them. Why talk about helping or not helping? And Mother loves me the most." Yunyao nodded and revealed a faint smile. Bailey Ningsu smiled and said in a gentle voice, "Yao Yao, if you have any problems, just tell Mother directly." She held Bailey Ningsu's arm and lightly walked into the wooden house. As she walked, she said, "Mother, a month ago, the Sky Pillar sect encountered a great calamity. The demon race secretly plotted against the Sky Pillar sect. The 4 great sects of the heavenly stellar region also besieged the Sky Pillar sect, causing the Sky Pillar sect spirit vein and sealing formation to be broken. The demon emperor from 1,000 years ago also broke through the seal and escaped. He started a massacre in the Sky Pillar sect. That battle was very tragic. The Sky Pillar sect suffered disastrous losses and almost half of it was destroyed. However, my junior martial brother, Ji Tianqing, bravely stepped forward at the time of danger. He led our sect's disciples to block the demon emperor and heavily injured him before he fled. However, junior martial brother Tianqing was heavily injured in the battle with the demon emperor. His physical body has already died, leaving only a trace of his soul that hasn't been extinguished. When Bailey Ning Su heard this, she understood Yunyao's meaning. She stopped and tilted her head to look at Yunyao, a strange light faintly appearing in her eyes. Yao Yao, you mean you want mother to save your junior martial brother Tianqing? Yunyao quickly nodded and looked at Bailey Ning Su with a serious expression. Her eyes were full of hope and expectation. Mother, my grandfather is the world-famous divine Dr. Bailey. You inherited my grandfather's medical skills and are now the Central State's famous divine Dr. Su Shou. With your strength and medical skills, you will definitely be able to cure junior martial brother Tianqing. Junior martial brother Tianqing is only 17 years old and has such outstanding talent in martial arts. He also has willpower and responsibility that far surpasses ordinary people. He is truly a good man that is hard to come by. Bailey Ning Su stared at Yunyao and saw the urgency and worry in her eyes. She couldn't help but wave her hand and interrupt Yunyao. Yao Yao, mother knows your temperament the best. You have always been cold, aloof, and unapproachable. No matter how handsome and outstanding a man is, he can't enter your eyes. But now, you have such an evaluation of this Ji Tianqing and are so eager to return to Cloud Spirit Palace and ask mother to save him. Speaking up to here, Bailey Ning Su paused. She restrained her smile and looked at Yunyao with a serious expression. She asked in a solemn tone, Yao Yao, tell mother, do you like him? Yunyao froze and didn't know how to answer. Although her expression didn't change, her eyes were somewhat evasive. Her sparkling and cute earlobes were faintly red. When Bailey Ning Su saw her reaction, how could she not understand her thoughts? Sigh. You don't need to say anything. Mother already knows. Bailey Ning Su waved her hand and couldn't help but sigh. Chapter 477. Bailey Ningsu's mood was a bit complicated. She remained silent and didn't reply. When Yunyao was young, she left Cloud Spirit Palace and went to Tianjin region. She hadn't returned for many years. Now that Tianjin region had undergone a drastic change and Sky Pillar sect was in trouble, Yunyao had finally returned. But as soon as she returned, she brought back a man she liked and couldn't wait to arrange for him to enter Tranquil Sky. This scene had long been seen by the maids, guards, and many people in Cloud Spirit Palace. Bailey Ningsu didn't know if those maids and guards knew about the existence of Ji Tianqing. But she couldn't help but worry that if this news were to leak out, it would bring a lot of criticism and slander to Yunyao. At this time, Yunyao saw that her mother was expressionless and silently muttered, "Mother, no matter what, you should go in and take a look first. He suffered such heavy injuries in order to save the sect and Tianjin region. You are a kind-hearted godly doctor. You won't sit by and do nothing, right?" Bailey Ningsu only nodded and didn't say anything. After entering the wooden house, her gaze fell on the frost jade bed and sized up Ji Tianqing, who was sleeping peacefully. When she saw that Ji Tianqing was only 17 or 18 years old, her eyes couldn't help but flash with a hint of astonishment. Other than that, Ji Tianqing's appearance, figure, and temperament were very ordinary in her eyes. There was nothing special about him. Yunyao stood to the side and saw her mother sizing up Ji Tianqing. She felt an inexplicable sense of nervousness in her heart. She couldn't help but think that her mother's current state of mind and gaze was like a future mother-in-law sizing up her new son-in-law. This made her eyes flash with a hint of shyness. Her feelings became even more complicated. Fortunately, Bailey Ningsu didn't say anything and didn't make any comments about Ji Tianqing. She walked to the side of the frost jade bed and stretched out her slender fingers. She formed a seal and used a secret technique to check on Ji Tianqing's injuries. A hazy white light shrouded Ji Tianqing's body, probing him silently. After about 10 breaths of time, Bei Ningsu finally stopped and withdrew the white light. Yunyao had been staring at the changes in her mother's expression. She was quite nervous and worried. Seeing that her mother had finished cultivating, she hurriedly asked, "Mother, how are Tianqing's injuries? Can you save him?" Bei Ningsu nodded slightly, her expression calm. "Although his injuries are serious, if your father were to personally act, it wouldn't be difficult to save him. It would just be a bit troublesome. Yao, this matter is very important. You have to tell mother about Ji Tianqing's background and how you two met." Seeing that her mother did not reject her outright, Yunyao felt as if a huge rock had been lifted from her heart. She hurriedly said, "Half a year ago, as the head disciple of the Sky Pillar sect, I went to the Azure Sky Kingdom in the Tianshan region to supervise the recruitment of disciples. On my way to the Azure Sky Imperial City, I happened to see Tianqing being chased by assassins and saved him. At that time, he was the #1 genius of the Azure Sky Kingdom, but because of some reason, he fell back to the body refinement realm." Yunyao recalled the past and truthfully told Bei Ningsu about the things that happened between her and Ji Tianqing in the past half a year. Of course, the things she said were all for the sake of Ji Tianqing. Through one incident after another, she constantly praised Ji Tianqing's outstanding talent, firm will, calm and wise, righteous, brave and responsible, and so on. In short, deep in her heart, she firmly believed that Ji Tianqing was the most outstanding and special person. Bei Ningsu listened with a calm expression and occasionally asked a question or two. Half an hour later, when Yunyao finished talking about her and Ji Tianqing, Bei Ningsu silently weighed the pros and cons. She walked to the window and indifferently looked at the scenery outside. After a moment of consideration, Bei Ningsu calmly said, Yao, although the Sky Pillar sect is the #1 sect in the Tianshan region, it can't be compared to the Cloud Soul Palace. Back then, if you weren't young and stubborn and insisted on leaving the central state, father and mother wouldn't have agreed to let you leave the Cloud Soul Palace. Even if we let you go to the Tianshan region, it was only to train your temperament and let you wander the outside world to understand the dangers and hardships of the world. Since you've already returned, there's no need to return to the Sky Pillar sect. The survival of the Sky Pillar sect is insignificant to our Cloud Soul Palace. It's not worth mentioning. As for the demon emperor that was sealed 1,000 years ago, although it's an extremely troublesome demon, it's not up to our Cloud Soul Palace to interfere. The imperial court will naturally take care of it. Yunyao slightly frowned and asked, Mother, whether I should stay in the Cloud Soul Palace, and when I'll return to the Sky Pillar sect, we'll talk about this later. Right now, I just want to ask you to help treat Tianqing's injuries. Bei Ningsu still looked out the window and calmly said, Yao, you've already changed. You're no longer as calm and wise as before. You're worried about this youth and only have him in your eyes, so you've lost your sense of propriety and reason. This will be detrimental to your growth in the future. It will also bring you endless troubles and cause a lot of criticism and slander. This young man was considered an outstanding genius in the 9 regions of the southern continent. But in the central state, he's not eye-catching and is extremely ordinary. Moreover, with his background and status, he's destined to never reach the peak of the martial path and match up to your status. Right now, your father is in a critical period of closed-door cultivation. Mother definitely won't disturb your father's cultivation for such an insignificant person. Hearing this, Yunyao guessed her mother's attitude and immediately became anxious. She repeatedly shook her head and explained to Bei Ningsu, Mother, it's not what you think. I haven't changed and I don't care about what others think. You don't understand Tianqing, you don't know what kind of person he is, and you don't know how special he is. Tianqing's heart is filled with lofty aspirations and has extraordinary talent in the martial path. Moreover, he's loyal and righteous, and his character is extraordinary. Whether you believe it or not, I'm certain that Tianqing's future achievements will be limitless and his name will spread throughout the world. Mother, your medical skills are extraordinary. I believe that even if father doesn't personally come, you'll definitely have a way to save Tianqing. Bailey Ningsu glanced at her and said calmly, Yao Yao, you're too excited and blindly confident. This youth was able to force back the demon emperor, which is truly impressive. To the Tianjin region and the imperial court, he's a meritorious subject and should be rewarded, but that's all. He didn't manage to kill the demon emperor and ended up heavily injured. He even put himself in a desperate situation. This shows that he doesn't have enough strength. To deal with the demon emperor and eradicate the demon race, we'll have to rely on the imperial court strength. Moreover, you'll become a heavenly concubine next year. Since you've returned to Cloud Spirit Palace, you should pay attention to your words and image to avoid attracting criticism. In the future, don't get too close to these ordinary people. Otherwise, if the imperial court finds out, it'll make the emperor and empress unhappy. At this moment, Bailey Ningsu's tone was serious and her expression contained a trace of dignity. Yunyao stared at her mother in a daze. Her emotions became very complicated and her eyes revealed a trace of disbelief. Chapter 478. After staring blankly for a moment, Yunyao came back to her senses. She stared at Bailey Ningsu and shook her head in disbelief. Mother, you want me to be a heavenly consort? Didn't you tell me that you wouldn't force me to do anything I didn't want to do and that you wouldn't force me to be a heavenly consort? Bailey Ningsu's expression didn't change. She said earnestly, Yao Yao, a mother knows her daughter best. I know your nature the best. If I didn't tell you that, how could you come back so quickly? Yunyao was speechless. Her heart was filled with disappointment. Bailey Ningsu continued, Yao Yao, you haven't been in Cloud Soul Palace all these years, so you don't know the situation of the Yun family. Our Cloud Soul Palace is an ancient family and seems to be above the world. But in reality, the talents of the Yun family have withered in the past 100 years, and their power has been declining. The other two families have been eyeing our Yun family covetously. In recent years, they've been scheming and plotting against us. In recent years, if it weren't for the Son of Heaven secretly helping our Yun family, the other two families would have been even more arrogant and despotic. They would have attacked us a long time ago. The Son of Heaven has a noble status and is the #1 genius of the human race. He's also infatuated with you. Such a perfect match, who else could it be but him? Yao Yao, I'm not forcing you to be a heavenly consort to strengthen the Yun family. I'm just thinking for your future. I hope you can find a better home so that you can live a peaceful and happy life. Bailey Ningsu was the divine doctor's daughter and the current mistress of the Yun family. How noble was her status. She naturally wasn't someone who fawned over others. She wouldn't sacrifice her daughter's happiness for the sake of strengthening the Yun family. She just wanted Yunyao to have a more perfect and reliable home. Compared to the Son of Heaven, who had a noble status and outstanding talent, Ji Tianqing was just a nobody. He was just an ordinary person. If it were any other parent, they would have made the same choice as her. Yunyao's eyes were covered with a layer of mist, and she shook her head repeatedly, Mother, no matter what, I will never become a heavenly concubine. If he didn't love her, he didn't love her. This had nothing to do with the Son of Heaven's status and talent. Please forgive your daughter. I can't go against my heart for the sake of the bigger picture. Bailey Ningsu knew Yunyao's nature very well, so she wasn't surprised by what she said. She sighed with a heavy heart and said calmly, Yao Yao, we can temporarily put aside the matter of you being a heavenly concubine. However, you can never return to the Sky Pillar sect in the future. Seeing Yunyao's tearful face, Bailey Ningsu continued, after the Sky Pillar sect suffered a great calamity, it's already in ruins and is in imminent danger. Perhaps after the Demon Emperor recovered his strength, he would make a comeback and go to the Sky Pillar sect to take revenge. Mother absolutely won't allow you to go back to the Sky-bearing sect and take risks. You also have to give up on this idea. Even if you stay in the Sky Pillar sect, it will be difficult for you to grow and improve in the future. In this lifetime, you will never be able to break through the limits of the celestial being realm and surpass the Sky Origin realm. Compared to the Sky Pillar sect, the Monarch Mansion is where you should go. Only the top geniuses can enter the Monarch Mansion and study the more exquisite martial arts there. Only in the Monarch Mansion will you have the chance to surpass the Sky Origin realm and become a transcendent spirit refinement realm expert. The Monarch Mansion mentioned by Bailey Ningsu was one of the most mysterious and powerful forces in the Central State. The Monarch Mansion had thousands of years of inheritance and history. Its strength was incomparably powerful and unfathomable. No matter what happened in the Central State in these thousands of years, no matter how the situation changed, the Monarch Mansion had always stood tall. Regardless of the Southern Human Imperial Court, the Western Demonic Imperial Court, or the Eastern Water Imperial Court, none of them dared to become enemies with the Monarch Mansion. Of course, this was because the Monarch Mansion was too mysterious and powerful. It stood above the various forces and was unparalleled. However, there was another important reason. The Monarch Mansion was the top institution in the Central State and even the entire Tian-Xian continent. It was also the sacred martial arts ground in the hearts of countless geniuses. Regardless of the race, as long as one had extraordinary talent and martial arts aptitude, they would have the chance to enter the Monarch Mansion and study the profound martial arts. For thousands of years, the Monarch Mansion had cultivated countless transcendent spirit refinement realm experts. These transcendent spirit refinement realm experts came from different races and had become influential figures in the Tian-Xian continent. Therefore, all the races were extremely respectful to the Monarch Mansion and did not dare to offend them. And those geniuses who could enter the Monarch Mansion to further their studies also had lofty statuses. They were highly regarded and favored by all the major forces. The disciples of all the major races, major forces, and aristocratic families in the Central State all strive to enter the Monarch Mansion. However, when Yunyao heard the words, Monarch Mansion, she did not have the slightest yearning or expectation. Instead, she revealed a trace of resistance. She had never thought of entering the Monarch Mansion and had always resisted it. She only wanted to save Ji Tianqing and was worried about the Sky-bearing sect. It was impossible for her to enter the Monarch Mansion to study. Mother, you know that I have already said that I don't want to enter, Yunyao refused with a firm tone. However, she was interrupted by Bailey Ningsu before she could finish her sentence. Bailey Ningsu looked at her with a serious expression and gently shook her head. She said with a gentle but firm tone, Yao Yao, this is the decision that your father and mother have made together. It cannot be changed. Mother has already arranged everything for you. After a while, Mother will send you to the Monarch Mansion to study. You should also take this time to rest and prepare. Seeing that Yunyao was unwilling to relent, Bailey Ningsu added, Yao Yao, father and mother are doing this for your own good. No matter how unwilling you are, you will understand our good intentions in the future. After saying that, Bailey Ningsu turned to leave. Yunyao hurriedly chased after her and grabbed her arm. She begged with a face full of worry, Mother, daughter is begging you. Please save Tianqing. Bailey Ningsu stopped and turned to look at her. She said earnestly, Yao Yao, Mother has already made it very clear to you. This child is not related to Cloud Soul Palace. If I save him, it will definitely cause criticism and affect the relationship between Cloud Soul Palace and the Imperial Court. How can Mother save him? Yunyao was unwilling to give up. She asked, Mother, are you really not going to save him? Bailey Ningsu saw that her daughter was so stubborn and sad. She couldn't bear it. However, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She calmly explained, Yao Yao, it's not that Mother doesn't want to save him. It's just that Mother is powerless. Although Mother has miraculous medical skills, I'm only at the heaven origin realm. I haven't reached the soul refinement realm. Your father is a transcendent realm expert. If he were to help, he would definitely be able to save that youth. Chapter 479. Bailey Ningsu had already made her stance very clear, and Yun Yao's last bit of hope was instantly shattered. Tears fell uncontrollably from her big, clear eyes. Her lips moved several times, wanting to beg her mother again, but she couldn't say anything. Bailey Ningsu suppressed the pain in her heart and expressionlessly said, "Yao Yao, you're already very tired. You should go back and rest. As for that youth, if you want him to recuperate here, then let him stay here. Cloud Soul Palace won't save him, but they also won't drive him out so heartlessly. Tranquil Sky is suitable for resting souls and recuperating, so it's also good for him to stay here. As for whether he can wake up or not, that will depend on his own luck." After saying this, Bailey Ningsu walked out of the wooden house and left without looking back. Yun Yao stood at the door in a daze, watching her mother's figure disappear into the distance. Her eyes were covered with a layer of mist, and her heart was filled with sorrow and helplessness. She originally thought that as long as she brought Ji Tianqing back to Cloud Soul Palace, there would definitely be a way to cure Ji Tianqing. Her mother had always been gentle and virtuous, and loved her dearly. Her father was also kind and dignified, treating her as the apple of his eye and never saying a harsh word to her. Yun Yao thought that her parents would empathize with her and treat Ji Tianqing for her sake. She didn't expect that the end result would be like this. The hope that had risen in her heart with great difficulty was shattered just like that. However, her mother's reaction was also within her expectations. Even if her mother made this decision, she had nothing to complain about. She only hated that she wasn't strong enough and couldn't think of a better way for the time being. In Tianxing's most helpless moment, she could only watch helplessly. She could not do anything about it. After standing in silence for a while, Yun Yao raised her sleeve to wipe away the tears in her eyes and turned to walk back into the house. She walked to the ice jade bed and stared at the sleeping Ji Tianqing. She whispered in a firm tone, "Tianqing, don't worry, I won't give up. No matter what, I will think of a way to save you. I will definitely wake you up as soon as possible." "Definitely." Yun Yao quickly calmed down and began to think of all kinds of ways. Even if her parents could not save Ji Tianqing, she would do her best to help Ji Tianqing heal his soul. She prayed silently in her heart. Tianqing's luck was long and he was gifted. Perhaps there would be a miracle? In the dark and cold Kenshin tomb. Under the pitch-black and ice-cold heavenly sword steel, a ball of spiritual energy wrapped around Ji Tianqing's soul and attached itself to the sword steel. At this time, the originally quiet white soul mist surged for a while and condensed into a palm-sized white person. It was Ji Tianqing. He had heard the conversation between Yun Yao and Bailey Ningsu clearly. Recalling Yun Yao's words, his expression was a little complicated. He muttered to himself in a low voice, "Eldest senior sister, I've wronged you. In the past, our hearts were connected, but we never said it to each other face to face. We hid our feelings in the bottom of our hearts. If I wasn't seriously injured and unconscious and my soul separated, I wouldn't have known that your feelings for me were so deep. You treat me like this, I, Ji Tianqing, will not let you down in this life." Ji Tianqing's expression was incomparably firm and solemn. In the next 3 days, Yun Yao was busy without sleep or rest. She had to give Ji Tianqing 2 soul-nurturing pills every day to nourish his soul. In addition, she also flipped through the books stored in several wooden houses, looking for a way to save Ji Tianqing. On the evening of the 3rd day, she finally found a clue in an old, yellowed medical book that had many notes written on it. It was clearly written in the book that there was a sacred item called Nirvana Crystal, that could strengthen the soul of a separated person and let the soul return to its original place. Ji Tianqing's current condition was that his soul was separated from his body. His soul was severely injured, and his strength was weak. A normal person's soul was like a torch that burned fiercely until the day it burned out, and they would die. However, Ji Tianqing's soul was like a candle. The flame was weak and would not be able to hold on for long before it was extinguished. When Yunyao saw this, her eyes flashed with a bright light, and a strong sense of hope gushed out. She hurriedly continued reading, wanting to know what the Nirvana crystal was and where she could get it. It was written in the book that the Nirvana crystal, a sacred item, was said to be a treasure left behind by the divine beast Phoenix when it was reborn. According to the legends, the divine beast Phoenix was immortal and indestructible. It could continuously undergo a nirvanic rebirth. The Nirvana crystal produced by the Phoenix when it was reborn contained a supreme and mysterious power. That power could allow a separated person to be reborn like a phoenix and wake up again. What made Yunyao the most excited and invigorated was that the Nirvana crystal had appeared in the central state 200 years ago. There were a total of 2 Nirvana crystals, and they came from the Phoenix and the Phoenix respectively. They were a perfect pair. When those 2 Nirvana crystals appeared in the central state, it had once caused various powerhouses to fight over them, and various major powers fought for them. But in the end, that pair of Nirvana crystals passed through several people's hands and landed in the hands of divine Dr. Bailey. From then on, that pair of Nirvana crystals never appeared again. Regarding the news of the Nirvana crystal, the medical book only wrote until here and did not continue. Yunyao closed the medical book, and her charming face revealed a strong sense of hope as her eyes surged with a bright light. That's great. I finally found a way to save Tianqing. Divine Dr. Bailey is my grandfather, and the Nirvana crystal is actually with him. After a moment, her agitated emotions calmed down, and she frowned again. But grandfather has already disappeared for many years. How am I going to find the Nirvana crystal? Yunyao frowned and pondered for a while before getting up and walking out of the wooden house. She prepared to leave Tranquil Sky and ask the elders in her family about this matter. Walking to the small courtyard outside the wooden house, she activated Tranquil Sky's teleportation array. Swoosh! A white light flashed, and Yunyao left Tranquil Sky and returned to the corridor on the 3rd floor of Nebula Hall. Just as she was about to leave, a clear male voice came from behind her. Cousin Yao Yao, you're finally out. That was the voice of a young man, and his tone was filled with intimacy and joy. It was obvious that he was excited about Yunyao's appearance. When Yunyao heard this familiar voice, she stopped in her tracks and turned to look behind her. She saw a handsome young man in a blue brocade robe walking towards her with a smile on his face. That young man was about 30 years old, and he was tall and slender. His face was handsome and fair, and he was even holding an exquisite purple jade folding fan in his hand. This person's figure and appearance were excellent, and when he smiled, he made people feel as if they were bathing in the spring breeze, and they would never feel disgusted. This gentle and elegant noble young master was Yunyao's cousin, Zhu Fifan. Zhu Fifan's mother was Bailey Ningsu's biological sister, so he called Bailey Ningsu his aunt. When Zhu Fifan was very young, his parents both died. Bailey Ningsu saw that he was young and lonely, so she brought him to live in Cloud Soul Palace. All these years, Zhu Fifan had been living in Cloud Soul Palace, and the servants of the Yun family respectfully called him Young Master Biao. Zhu Fifan inherited his mother's talent and ambition. All these years, he had been diligently studying the art of medicine, and he already had the attainments of a grandmaster. However, his talent and attainments in the art of poison far exceeded that of medicine. He was not a common grandmaster of the art of medicine, but a grandmaster of the art of poison that made people tremble in fear. Since Yunyao was very young, Zhu Fifan had been caring and protective of her. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.